Work session.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The board is now in work session. First, I would like to thank everyone in the audience for attending this evening and to let you know that Supervisor Matt Gabriel is out of town. Officials from Mountain Valley Pipeline are here at the request of the Board of Supervisors to make a brief presentation on their plans. And we would like to thank them as well for being here tonight. Now let me explain the agenda for the board's work session, which will end promptly at 10:30, so the custodial staff can clean up and be ready for school tomorrow. In addition to tonight's presentation, pipeline officials will be holding an open house in Montgomery County in December, as required by FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. This will be the time for property owners to talk one-on-one with pipeline officials about how this project may affect them individually. As we walk in this evening, you may have received a large index card to write down questions you would like to ask about the pipeline project. Once you complete your card, please raise your hand and a staff member will pick these up for county staff to read aloud later in the meeting. If we don't get through all of those questions submitted on index cards tonight, county staff will mail all of these questions to pipeline officials tomorrow. As a reminder, the meeting will conclude at 10:30 p.m. If anyone still needs an index card, please raise your hand now and staff members will come around to you.
There's a couple in the back and there's one lady over there. And there's
Okay.
folks up front.
So staff look for those hands and get the cards to those people. Okay, before we begin, please take a moment to find the exit door closest to where you're sitting. If we should have an alarm go off, please exit immediately at the exit nearest to your seat. And board members, in order to maximize our time tonight, if you need to go to the restroom, just go, because we're not going to take any breaks so we can try to get as many questions answered as possible. Now, I would like Mountain Valley officials to begin their presentation, but first, I would like to ask the audience to give our speakers the courtesy that you would like others to give you and refrain from any comments or clapping so that everyone may hear what is being said.
Chairman Brown, members of the board, members of the Montgomery community, thank you very much for hosting us tonight. We very much appreciate the opportunity to introduce you to our companies, to introduce you to the project, and discuss some of the specific concerns that you have in relation to this. It's quite clear to us that we don't agree on everything. We do want to assure you that this is the very beginning of a long dialogue. It's at a minimum a 24-month process. And during that process, we want to be open, we want to be transparent, and we want to provide you with timely information so that we can communicate on a productive level. Before I get started, I do want to introduce my colleagues. To my right is Joe Lombardo with EQT, and then Max Macon with Nextera. Like myself, I believe I introduced myself. I'm Chris Sherman. I'm with Nextera Energy. And then at the end is Maurice Royster, also with EQT. Mountain Valley Pipeline is a joint venture between our companies. Between the two companies, we have over 200 years of building and operating energy infrastructure. EQT is a better-known name within this region. They're a leading Appalachian natural gas production and transmission company with operations in Virginia, West Virginia, Kentucky, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Texas. NextEra Energy, my company, is a Florida-based company. Our origins are in the generation, transmission, and distribution of electricity. We started as Florida Power and Light, and we expanded outside of Florida and are currently in 26 states. Our branding is largely, we are the largest producer of renewable energy in North America. So upon completion of the pipeline, EQT, as the majority owner, will be the operator of the pipeline. Now, why Mountain Valley Pipeline? I think to everybody it's become quite apparent over the past few years, much as a result of new abundant supplies of natural gas. Our economy and our society is transitioning. Those supplies traditionally were supplied by the Gulf Coast region, largely out of Texas, Louisiana, areas like that, and the pricing for that commodity was typically indexed to Henry Hub, Louisiana. That is no longer the case. There are now more abundant supplies. It has altered the market, and it has increased the desire amongst the public and society to transition to the gas because it's a lower cost, because it's cleaner burning, and because it's much more flexible for operations. Right down to the residential level, consumers, we've seen a significant amount of population growth. Right now in the United States, natural gas use for residential purposes is at about 25%. However, in areas where there's access to natural gas, it exceeds 90%. Again, it's low cost, much more convenient availability, and it's cleaner burning fuel. Electric generation, which is NextEra's core competency, much of the generation fleet within the U.S. has converted to natural gas. Natural gas is the #2 fuel to coal currently. The reason for that is that the emission profile of natural gas is considerably less than other forms of fossil fuels, particularly carbon emissions. Carbon emissions are approximately 60% less than they are with some of the other fossil fuels. But also, too, the operational flexibility that it provides electrical generators, the ability to start a unit faster, to shut a unit down faster, and to cycle a unit faster. That results in a more efficient electric grid that, again, results in less emissions and the need to build less capacity. And then finally, manufacturing, access to low-cost energy. We have been traveling along the route, and we have met with the officials of all 5 counties. We're now coming back doing public presentations, and one of the things that we hear repeatedly is that areas have either lost the ability to attract new industry or have lost industry that have left, and as a result of that, of course, have lost the jobs because they don't have access to a reliable, low-cost clean fuel. And what we have seen historically in the 1700s, industry coalesced around rivers and waterways, and then in the 1800s, industry coalesced around railroads. 1900s, they coalesced around highways, and now, similarly, we will see them coalesce around natural gas pipelines. As I had mentioned, there are now more prolific supplies of natural gas, namely in the Marcellus and the Utica. The production currently exceeds the average demand, and those suppliers have a desire to get that product to market, and that's what we as a pipeline seek to do. And then finally, local economic benefits. A project like this creates economic benefits primarily in 2 ways. Through economic benefits during the development and the construction, but really more so through the availability of natural gas, as I had stated. Natural gas will attract industry. The trend right now is nationwide, we are starting to see manufacturing jobs come back to the U.S. as a result of the availability of low-cost fuel. Now, about the Mountain Valley Pipeline specifically, the route as it exists today, and again, it's preliminary. I'll discuss the the identification of the route and what we're going to go through. But right now we've identified a 300-mile line from Wetzel County, West Virginia to Pittsylvania County, Virginia. It goes through about 16 counties. We're modeling a pipeline diameter of 36 inches to 42 inches. And that will depend upon the demand, ultimately the commercial subscriptions for the line. And then there'll be a total of 3 to 4 compressor stations along the line. A compressor station serves to maintain the pressure along the line to maintain a constant flow of the gas. The current capacity that we're looking for is between 2 and 2.5 BCF a day. And just to explain a bit what a capacity subscription is, it's probably most appropriate to analogize to a highway. Owners of pipeline infrastructure, they own infrastructure similar to a highway. They don't own the gas. They don't own the gas, much like a highway doesn't own cars, doesn't own trucks. The owner of gas, the owner of the actual commodity, will pay a pipeline owner-operator to reserve space so that they have the ability to ship on an ongoing, consistent basis to get their product to market. Right now, we have closed our open season. The shipper interest continues to be very robust. We are in the process now. The original, we go with a non-binding open season. It's kind of, if we built this, would you consider? That was overwhelmingly successful, and now we are in the process of turning that into commercial arrangements. We estimate the cost of the line to be somewhere between $3 and $3.5 billion. That's a fairly wide window. The cost will vary, obviously, according to the size of the line and ultimately what the route is. So the commercial overview, as I indicated, we have extended the open season to solicit additional commitments. That is now closed. We will have all the commitments we need for commercial success of the property. And our main focus right now is in route development. We are on approximately our third version of the route. We identify a route first from a desktop analysis perspective, and it's kind of a linear view of how we get from one point to the other with the most basic knowledge of the property going through that route. And then after that, we begin to refine that route and improve upon that route when we gain greater knowledge of the specifics of each parcel of land. That is our interest in the reason why we have sent out letters to the landowners along the route. Those began going out in June. There's about 1,400 parcels along that 300 route. In Montgomery County, there's approximately 132 parcels. As of today, all of those letters have gone out. So everybody who would be within that 300-foot corridor should have received a letter. Ultimately, the easement that we hope to secure would be approximately 70 feet. But we're looking to gain access to a 300-foot corridor. And the reason we're doing that is we want to be able to assess all of the unique characteristics along that so we can refine and ultimately improve upon the route. So we're going to begin survey activity any time now and hope to refine the route probably in a more final form by sometime of April or May of next year. Now, the regulatory approvals down on the bottom that ultimately we're seeking a certificate of public convenience and necessity to build a pipeline. That is, it's not a permit to build a pipeline, but really it represents a bundle of permits. And that process is overseen by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC, under the authority of the Natural Gas Act. So I want to take a moment to just kind of explain in greater detail what the filings will look like, what the overview of the time frame will look like, and what the permits we're looking for. So you'll see that the review is by the by FERC, and it's actually primarily under the National Environmental Policy Act, and many people are probably familiar with that. It's FERC, NEPA. And NEPA is a multi-part process that has one lead agency, and as I indicated, that's FERC in this instance. Under that lead agency are the consulting agencies at both the federal level, the state level, right down to the county level. And all of those consulting agencies, along with the stakeholders in the community, comment to FERC on the specifics of a route, a community, the economics of a project, and develop a scope for a document. And once that scope has been agreed upon by FERC, we develop an environmental impact statement, or FERC develops a draft environmental impact statement. Those are large documents. They contain many parts, the many aspects, and you can imagine there are varied aspects to permitting a project like this: environmental, public safety, economics, proposed alternatives to a route. That draft EIS comes out, it goes into a comment period, and then ultimately results in a final EIS, and then ultimately, we hope, a certificate of public convenience and necessity. So where we are right now, you can see on this schedule, is we've begun developing our route, and we will continue to develop the route. We have entered into, as of, I believe it was last week, we filed a pre-filing request with FERC. That is a discretionary process. Approximately 70% of projects go into a pre-filing process. And what that does is it begins the stakeholder process and the consultative process with the agencies at an earlier time, probably about a year earlier. And it has two benefits. It benefits the project and it benefits the stakeholders. The stakeholders have an opportunity to see all of the information and comment on all of that information at an earlier time. And when we make our FERC application, which will be probably in about a year from now, in the fall of 2015, we also will have the benefit of that feedback. And our application will be a better, stronger, more complete application to FERC. FERC will consider that application for a period of about a year. We would expect to have our certificate and commence construction in the end of 2016, two-year construction period, and in-service date at the end of 2018. So this is a more granular look at the schedule for community participation and comment. And the stakeholder participation, not just at the agency level or at the public official level, but throughout, right down to the community, the residents, all of the landowners, the input that is provided is really paramount to the NEPA process. It helps develop the scope and it helps develop the information that goes into the draft EIS. So the project was originally announced in June. We began sending out letters to landowners in June. And then we started notifying the agencies, the county agencies, the state agencies, the state officials between August and September. We're meeting with boards like we are tonight. Starting in October, we will meet with our last board in our last public meeting in Virginia in 2 weeks, and then we will have conducted public meetings, our first round of public meetings with all 5 counties in Virginia. So we expect that the FERC pre-filing process, FERC has to accept that. We anticipate it will be accepted, and then that process starts in November of 14, and then we have community open houses. Community forums like the one we're doing now that's not exclusive to all developers, to all projects. It's something we feel strongly about. We want to come out, we want to hear your concerns, we want to talk to the public officials, but also the public directly. But really, the first opportunity and the first requirement upon us as project proponents to gather information and put it out to the public is at the community open houses. Those are done in a little bit of a different format. They're done in a station format. So public safety, environmental issues, landowner concerns, commercial issues, public benefits, all of those are separate stations at these open houses where people can go and get more direct, granular information about the project. We will have, those will start in December, and then they will end in December. And then in the spring, FERC will start the scoping meetings that I had referenced, and they actually have public meetings. They're somewhat similar to this. And then they have a written comment period as well. And then ultimately, there is a docket that is now open at FERC, and FERC is accepting comments and will continue to accept comments throughout the whole two-year process. Environmental protection is of paramount concern and interest to us. We want to make sure, we believe that there are inherent tremendous values to natural gas, but we recognize the need to develop a project like this in the most environmentally benign manner possible. It's our policy, but it is also provided by law, the National Environmental Policy Act, the Endangered Species Act, National Historic Preservation Act, Clean Water Act, Clean Air, and other laws. And all of those laws specifically, and the requirements of those, at a minimum, need to be addressed in the environmental impact statement. Now, what we do during our route development, our engineering, and our construction, we have erosion sediment control measures, we have spill prevention planning and protection measures, and we monitor sensitive resources and habitats. We survey them before we begin construction, and then we monitor them during construction. The environmental management during construction, every contractor that's on that job will receive uniform training. They will have knowledge about the sensitivities that you all have, that we all have, to maintain the environmental integrity of that route. It's inspected on an ongoing basis, both by representatives of the construction firms, by our companies, and by FERC. And we monitor on a weekly basis, and we report to FERC. Now, ultimately, at the end of the construction, FERC will provide in their certificate the manner in which we have to restore the property. Typically, that property is restored as close to pre-construction standards as possible. Pipeline safety, I've seen some of the presentations that have been given, and we understand that that's a concern. A project like Mountain Valley Pipeline, any pipeline project, is, again, it's predicated on the value of expanding access to natural gas. However, it's unacceptable to do it at the expense of public safety. The truth is, if we are going to expand natural gas, if that is our societal and our economic mandate, there are really three ways we can do it. We can truck it, we can transfer it by rail, or we can put it into an interstate pipeline. Interstate pipelines are by far the safest way to transport natural gas. When the pipeline is in operation, it's the Department of Transportation's Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Administration, so the actual operation of the pipeline and the safety of the pipeline is monitored by the Department of Transportation. During the construction of the line, when the sections of pipe are fabricated, they're typically fabricated in 40-foot sections. When they are fabricated, they're pressure tested. They're wrapped at the facility in an epoxy coating. And what the epoxy coating does is it prevents corrosion and it prevents abrasion. When they are taken on site and they are welded together, then those joints are again wrapped in an epoxy coating. The entire line, including those connections, are inspected to make sure that there are no breaches in that epoxy coating. And then they're x-rayed to make sure that the facility is complete integrity. It's a fully sealed facility. The pipeline will be buried approximately 3 to 4 feet, maybe a little deeper in some areas. And prior to operation, the pipeline is pressure tested, typically with water. During operation, we understand the concern of communities for the occurrence of an incident. We do deal with the local emergency response officials to make sure that everybody is knowledgeable and prepared as to the location and the safety and emergency procedures in the event of an incident. We have the ability to monitor the pipeline 24 hours a day. We monitor from a remote location. We monitor the quantity of gas, the pressure of the gas, the flow of the gas, and the quality of the gas. We can tell fairly instantaneously if there is an incident on the line. We maintain the rights-of-way on an ongoing basis. That will also vary according to the use of the property, and we can discuss, I'm sure we're going to get some questions in regards to people's ability to use the property. The use of the property is largely unencumbered. There are some restrictions on property. You can't build a structure on property. But if somebody has an agricultural operation on their property, provided that the root system isn't too deep, and that's really probably limited to trees, that operation can continue. And then we conduct periodic maintenance, both internal to the pipe, external to the pipe. We actually have remote vehicles that we can put in the pipe. They run the length of the pipe, and they test the integrity of the pipe all the way along for corrosion, abrasion, anything that would adversely affect the facility. So finally, the economic impact analysis. Clearly the importance to any community, and we recognize this, is if a community is going to host an infrastructure project, what's in it for the community? We are in the process of conducting an economic analysis, very granular, at the county-by-county level. It will go through the jobs created, it will go through the tax benefits, it will make projections as to the economic benefits from the availability of natural gas. So, Mr. Chairman, that concludes our prepared remarks, and we look forward to taking questions. And I want to say I really do appreciate everybody's cooperation during the presentation.
Okay, thank you. Before we allow the board to start asking questions, I want to remind people where the restrooms were. The restrooms, if you go out that door, turn to your left. Before you get to the exit doors, it'll be 2 quarters on your left. You'll find the restrooms in those quarters. Now, at this time, I would like to ask the board members if they have any questions, and I'm sure that they do, and I'm going to start with Mr. Gary Creed.
First, I want to say that there's plenty of seats for all you that's standing. If you'd like seats, I can count 60, 70 seats here real easily. If any of you'd like to make way down and get your seat, I know you'll be a whole lot more comfortable by the time this thing is over with. And with that said, seats in here, there's about 16, 18 seats in here right in the middle. There's about 20, looks like 25, 30 maybe. There's plenty of seats. The first question that we have, and these are all questions that some of our constituents have asked, and we're going to try to get answers for them. The current proposed route will directly impact the North Fork of the Roanoke River and Craigs Creek. The environmental quality of these 2 streams have already been negatively compromised. Is the pipeline company willing to alter the route to avoid further degradation of these 2 waters?
We are currently obviously reviewing the route, and we're looking at sensitive areas specifically like that. If construction of the pipeline would further degrade those, then yes, that would be a consideration. It would be a consideration by us. It would be a consideration by the permitting agencies as well.
Thank you.
Mr. King.
I have a question and I have a couple of follow-ups.
Yes, sir.
Why did you simply follow the 765 kV line in submitting the proposed route?
I'm sorry, did you say why didn't we?
Yeah, why did you?
Why did we?
Yeah.
We find it has the least community impact typically to co-locate with other easements wherever possible. Now that's not possible everywhere, but where possible, best industry practices are to co-locate with other energy infrastructure.
Did you look at any other options?
We did look at other options and we're continuing to look at other options, yes sir.
Did you look at avoiding residential neighborhoods?
We do. There are, we want to avoid residential areas to the greatest extent possible. Obviously, in some areas, it's unavoidable.
The current proposed route has the pipeline disturbing several federal and state endangered species and their habitats. Will the route be altered to avoid adversely impacting these sensitive environmental areas of the county?
Yeah, I think that answer is similar to the other one. The answer is yes. So the purpose of the review of the route, all the way through the permitting process, and where we are right now in gathering information and gathering feedback, if we're unaware of something, then we want that to be brought to our attention. And that is considered the integrity of the route is weighed all the way along. And you know, we understand every area is sensitive to somebody. Ultimately, what we want to do is identify and construct on a route that has the least impact.
Thank you.
I have the next question. What are the steps you will take if any landowner refuses to let you onto their property? How far will you go in order to obtain access to that property?
So that's access during surveys, and where we are in that process, like I said, we have sent out all of the letters. The letter identifies our request to enter the property. We follow that up with a phone call. If people refuse, we will, on a temporary basis, try to avoid that piece of property. Ultimately, we do need to access that property, but what we want to do is, we feel that there are misunderstandings as to why somebody would not want us to access that property. Perhaps I'm mistaken, but we feel like, let me tell you what it doesn't do. It doesn't give us authority to build on it. It doesn't, what we want to know, and this goes back to the question about will we avoid sensitive areas, and my comment about every area is sensitive to somebody. I know there's a lot of landowners in this room that probably have received notice. We want to know from you where the sensitive areas on that property are. We recognize nobody knows better than you. And to my point, now, but I do want to answer your question directly. So we will continue to work with those people, try to get voluntary access. Ultimately, if we cannot do that, we will send a letter informing people that in 10 days or after 10 days, we will access the property as per law.
Okay. Ms. Perkins.
Right, this is a follow-up to some things you said and a couple of other questions that have been there, but right now we're looking at the proposed route that you all have determined you would like to have, your proposed route.
Yes.
Highly developed land is where this pipeline is currently drawn in the Preston Forest subdivision. Is the pipeline company, and this is another question, is the pipeline company willing to move that route away from this residential area in order to avoid the potential of some maybe catastrophic loss of property, life? and to avoid other neighborhoods where adverse impacts will be felt by having the pipeline going through a residential neighborhood. And in addition to that, have you considered that there will be a loss in property values? There will be a loss.
Please hold your applause so we can maximize our time here tonight.
There will be a loss, or at least some adverse effects and impacts on well water, that's drinking water, and particularly given the kind of land formations that we have. So are you willing to move, realizing those things?
We're willing to relocate the route so it's the most benign and effective route possible. So, and I know that that particular neighborhood has raised a lot of concerns. It would be disingenuous for me to come in here and say that we're going to commit to moving out of that neighborhood. So I do want to make that clear. I want to deal with the diminution in value. The diminution in value is addressed really in two ways. First, the landowner is compensated for the easement that is obtained on the land, and that compensation is intended to provide for a diminution in value. The truth is, there will be no material diminution in value. That is what the studies have indicated. Yes, sir.
I'll follow up later.
Okay, thank you.
I want to follow up a little bit on Annette's question regarding the wells. And I understand that FERC regulations require you to compensate. If you're blasting or damaging, you have to compensate a landowner. My question to y'all is, how often have you disputed when the landowner said, my well has been affected? Hold on, so we can get the question out. How often have you disputed those claims and said, look, you're going to have to take us to court? What percentage? I'm not asking you to give me exact cases. How frequently are you fighting landowners over when they're coming to you and saying, our wells are gone?
Yeah, we're not aware of that. I mean, that's, you know, I mean, it's unacceptable to pollute a well, so we're not.
No, I'm saying when you do some blasting
Sure.
in this area of the world, their water may go up, and go away. We dealt with it with some folks on the Smart Road that went through the Ellet Valley with blasting that took place there. Are you saying your company has always paid every single time someone says they've got a well, that your company's paid 100% of the time and not disputed it in court?
I'm honestly not aware of the answer to that. I mean, we'll have to follow up with you on that. I had actually thought you were talking about eminent domain type proceedings, and when it is generally property claims are challenged, and that's a very low, it's about 3% historically on a project. But I'm not familiar with what you're saying. I think the instance that you're referencing is if there is damage of an environmental nature, when we would challenge something like that.
Well, because of this area, and I apologize for following up, there's no public water for most of these folks that are going through Preston Forest. They're wells.
Right.
And so if you start doing blasting, they may not have any water, and may not have the abilities to be able to give water. And so I guess my question to you again is, how often has your company disputed when a landowner has said, my well is no longer functioning? How often has your company disputed that in court and fought them?
Yeah, and we're not aware of any particular instances of that, but we need to follow up. We don't want to say that there are, we just need to follow up with you on that.
Yes, thank you. Sorry.
Okay, I'll go back to Mr. Creed.
All right. The current proposed route will bisect two agricultural forestal districts located in the Catawba Valley and the Elliston-Peddler Hills area of Montgomery County. The purpose behind the AFDs is to conserve and protect land that is valued as a natural and ecological resource. The construction of a 42-inch pipeline conflicts with this purpose. Is the pipeline company willing to move the route to avoid the AFD lands in Montgomery County?
Again, I cannot commit to moving off of any one particular land. When we learn more about that resource and communicate that to the agencies, that determination will be made.
Well, not necessarily would you have to abide by this in order to answer the question as to whether the construction of pipeline is, whether you're willing to move it if it is a conflict.
If it's a conflict with a use, and I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be evasive. I guess I just don't understand what that exact use is, and so a scenario like that, they're fairly infinite, and it kind of comes back to, I think there's a lot of opinions on the conflict of uses that it would have with probably a lot of people's property.
Sure you are.
Okay, Mr. King.
In your past experience, do local fire department and rescue squads need any specialized training or equipment to respond to any disasters occurring along the pipeline route?
Our company offers specialized training to any fire departments that would want that. We do public awareness meetings with fire departments through a third-party company, and we attend. We also at compressor stations bring the local fire departments in and do some training with them at the compressor station so they understand what our facilities are and what kind of hazards are on compressor station property and what our emergency plan is at a compressor station.
But do they need any special equipment?
No, there's no special equipment needed for a natural gas emergency.
All right, if you had a disaster at this pipeline, how long would it take your response team to be on the scene?
Well, one thing we're doing now is we're installing remote controlled valves on the pipeline. So we have a gas control that monitors the pressures on our pipeline. So if there would be some type of incident, some type of rupture, they can close valves. So before we even have folks on the scene. As far as saying how long would it take to get to the scene, that would depend on where we would have an incident and how close the local operations folks were.
Can I follow up on that a little bit?
Yes, sir.
In some of the areas where this proposed route is going, and for our fire departments to respond, they just about have to have helicopters to get in to fight the fire, to suppress a fire that keep from the mountains burning up. And now, if our local fire department was to need a piece of equipment like a four-wheel drive heavy truck, tanker truck or something to get in, would you guys be willing to make a significant donation toward that piece of equipment?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that we have done in the past on all, we tend to focus on generation, but that is something we have done in the past, yes, particularly if it is a piece of equipment that is unique to a need.
Okay, I think I'm going to take a couple of my questions and wrap them around each other. And these have to do with questions that we received about compressor stations. And I guess the first one I have is our understanding that one of the compressors will have to be located in Virginia. Do you know where it will most likely be located?
We don't yet know where it will be located, but it is our expectation that it probably will be one in Virginia as well.
All right, are you thinking that this one might be here in Montgomery County?
No, not necessarily. We really have to determine what the ultimate route is, and the ultimate route will determine what the pressure is, the size of the pipe, and that will determine what the, where the location of the compressor station has to be.
Okay, so following along those lines then, since we're not sure about that, how much property is needed to locate one of these compressor stations?
Typically, the footprint of a compressor station is about 5 acres. The property that we would take, and it's different than how we would acquire the right-of-way. The right-of-way is acquired by easement. We would acquire that property in fee. We would own the property. It would be anywhere from 10 to 40 acres.
Okay, so you actually are going to own 10 to 40 acres.
We would seek to purchase the property. That's correct.
When you talk about these compressor stations being placed, would they be placed near a residential or high population area?
Typically, no. We try to find areas where there is little population to place a compressor station.
How far apart would they be? Like, is this something that there's like one in Virginia? Are you talking about, we've heard all kinds of things like every 7 miles?
No, it wouldn't be every 7 miles. If you look at the 300-mile pipeline, you figure about every 75 miles.
75, okay. Now I have a question about it. After it's there, how is it maintained as far as security? How's it secured?
It's fenced, locked. We have cameras at compressor stations that gas control, feed back to gas control so that they can see.
Okay, all right, thank you.
The current proposed route has the pipeline going through very karst areas of Montgomery, of the county, containing sinkholes and caves. Will the route be altered to avoid impacting these sensitive areas of the county?
Yeah, it will be altered where necessary to avoid sensitive areas that are of a value to the, you know, for a cave or something like that, but also a sensitive area that would be inadequate from a subsurface condition. It would be altered to avoid that as well.
Okay, a couple of follow-ups to Ms. Dukes and others. My first question is your company really worried about the potential catastrophic loss of property and life by locating such a large pipeline through this neighborhood? I understand that this will be the largest pipeline that has been put through, 42 inches, which may have more potential for some problems with the heavily wooded areas which you're going to propose to put the pipeline through. In some of these areas, in Preston Forest particularly, there's only one way in and out. So when this proposed pipeline goes right through the middle of the neighborhood, how are the people going to get in and out? Like Mr. Brown said, we need a helicopter. Are you willing to do anything to try to make certain that these incidents don't occur?
Now, I guess if I can start kind of at the beginning of that.
Are you worried about it?
Are we worried about it? We do not consider that to be insignificant. We take public safety as paramount. And so any incident that would result in harm is unacceptable to us. So are we worried about it? We're aware of it, we're cognizant of it, and we take all precautions. But I will say unequivocally, we are confident that this pipeline will be safe.
I'm not asking that. I'm asking what happens to those areas where you've already got the pipeline through and something occurs.
I guess I'm a little confused. Is that the access question? I mean, it wouldn't, the installation of the pipeline wouldn't prevent access to that area. Was your question that if it is a subdivision, for instance, that has only one ingress and egress, would we try to provide a second one? I think the answer to that is the installation of the pipeline wouldn't alter the need for additional ingress and egress into a neighborhood.
All right, follow-up. What would be the procedure for property owners to make a claim for damages? This is to follow up on some of the other questions. Might be a damaged well, it might be a cracked foundation. How much proof, that's been asked too, is required. If a property owner lives half a mile away from blasting and they do lose their well, how much proof, again, do you require before you will offer compensation to those individuals?
I will say the first outreach if somebody has a claim of any kind is to the company. So they would reach out to us and say we have a claim of whatever kind. And we would seek to settle it between the parties. If it could not be settled to the satisfaction of somebody who made that claim, then they would go to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. The amount of proof or evidence, if you will, I hate to say it varies from case to case. I think I just don't have a quantifiable answer for that, what it would look like, whether it would be a test of water conditions against a baseline test. I think that it could really run the gamut. So unfortunately, I don't really have a specific answer to that.
There's one other thing that comes with this as far as property is concerned. What we've asked over and over again is, are you willing to move the pipeline? Suppose you get into the construction and you find things that have not been made plain to you, or that you're not aware of, or you are aware of, but it's not working. How much will it be to move the pipeline then?
Well, how much? It could be significant, you know, because a move in a pipeline can result in a multi-mile change in course. Now, that's not always up to us. So if I've been involved in a lot of energy infrastructure projects of a linear nature, and there have been circumstances where during construction, there have been conditions that were identified and did result in a change of a route to a project.
So what you're saying is, really, once you start construction and you're given permission to put the pipeline through, you can't move it or you won't move it?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying we could be forced to move it.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up question. You mentioned that if you had to litigate over the wells, that you would have to go through a federal procedure, so you would not be able to bring suit in state court here in the local courts. You would have to file down in either Abington or Roanoke?
No, what I was referring to is if somebody has a claim, I wasn't actually talking about litigation in that instance. It is kind of non-litigatory procedure, if you will. Somebody would come to us with a claim, try to negotiate a resolution to that claim. If it was not resolved to their satisfaction, they would go to FERC. So then if FERC didn't resolve it to their satisfaction, then I guess your question is, where would they go? Would that be federal court? It strikes me that it may, but I don't totally know the answer to that.
So this whole time, while they're going through all those different hoops, they don't have any water.
Yeah, it would depend upon, I understand the scenario we're rolling out. I just, you know, that's...
Now, I don't do much federal work, but I understand that it's really hard to get a court date in the federal court, and that may take a year.
And I honestly don't know that if it's a federal appellate procedure. I honestly just don't know. I know the procedure when they come to us and then they go to FERC. When it goes into litigation, I don't know whether it's state or federal.
In regards to, I have a question about seismology, and I'm an attorney by practice, I'm not a geologist, but I'm aware that we've got a major fault line over in Giles County. We also have some minor fault lines here in Montgomery County. You've got the biggest 42-inch pipeline, I guess the biggest in the country, that's going to be going through here. Have you factored in, you talked about all those wells, what about the effects of an earthquake on this pipeline when you have a major fault line over in Giles County? And when we in this area of the world, when we had the earthquake in Washington, we could, or I guess it was down in Louisa County, we could feel it here. And so, how is this pipeline designed to be able to sustain an earthquake?
All of the geologic considerations will be taken into effect during the permitting, but then also during the design and manufacture and fabrication of the pipe.
You went through a lot of specifics.
Yeah.
And you went through it, how it's going to be wrapped.
Yeah.
I didn't really hear you say anything about seismology. Am I mistaken? Was there a part of the presentation that I missed where I've got this, but there doesn't seem to be, I didn't hear you mention seismology and the risks of that.
Right, no, I did not, and that's because it is not a major risk to pipeline construction. There is actually, beyond consideration of the geologic conditions, there are not federal regulations for seismic conditions. And it's worth expanding on that just to say there is 320,000 miles of interstate natural gas pipeline. And probably the vast majority of that would be considered to be in an area that has some seismic activity. And the experience is that it is not a concern, and it is a consideration, not a concern in the construction of a pipeline.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No problem. We'll go back to Mr. Craig.
Yeah, I've got a couple here, and I want to follow up on an answer you had just a little bit ago. What makes avoidable a neighborhood unavoidable when, I can't read it, when preparing a pipeline?
Yeah. What makes it unavoidable?
What makes it unavoidable?
To move it.
If you have to move it.
The only thing, it's just a consideration of the overall route. So no particular neighborhood is unavoidable, or nothing makes it unavoidable. It's just the route is considered in its totality to have the least impact over the entire route. So there's no one particular, and there is one neighborhood I understand that you're considering. There's nothing that makes that unavoidable per se.
Okay. Get back to my right questions here. How much insurance does the pipeline company carry?
It really depends upon the value of the line and the permit. So it's the bonding and insurance levels are specified in the permit and the certificate that's granted by FERC, and it is dependent upon the value of the pipeline.
And the follow-up to that is, what does it specifically cover should an incident occur during construction or while in operation?
Yeah, so I don't know the specific terms, beyond liability and property damage. I unfortunately don't know the specifics of that. We will look into that and follow up.
Okay, and this one is one that one of my constituents wrote. Why was Floyd County dropped from your radar?
We were looking to cross, when we evaluated the line, our prior crossing with the Appalachian Trail and the Blue Ridge Parkway was less impactful based upon this latest revision that avoids Floyd County. So I've said this in other public meetings, I will say it again today. The amount of opposition in Floyd County had absolutely no impact on the movement of that line.
In your past experience of installing natural gas pipeline, has residential property value declined?
The gathering system and pipeline structures that we have been involved in, once the pipeline is in the ground and it's operating, we have found that the property values very, very little, actually.
So they have declined?
I'm sorry?
They have declined?
Well, no, that they didn't take a major decline, that they held.
You said major, but they did decline. Right?
Yes, I mean, you have to look at the specific areas. It's my understanding that there are actually studies that show that the pipeline, after it's installed in the ground and reclaimed, had minimal impact on the value of the property.
And I think it's also fair to note that that is what the compensation is based upon. So we compensate for that easement based upon the market value of that property that is being used. So any degradation in value would be compensated for per the easement agreement.
So you already have something in place to say you're going to lose so much value.
We don't have anything in place. It is based upon the specifics of that property and the use of that property. So it's very unique to that property. We go to great pains to consider each property.
I have a couple of follow-ups before I get to my question. Getting back there to the unavoidable, okay? So you're coming through the Preston Forest neighborhood, let's say, and the pipeline is going right next to a home, or right through someone's deck, or, right there, okay? So that wouldn't qualify as a point to move it. In other words, it's okay to go right next to a home, or it's okay to go through a home. That doesn't qualify to make it unavoidable. Is that what I'm hearing?
That is what you're hearing. It's not okay to go through a home, so there can't be a structure on the easement itself, but it is permissible to build a structure up to the easement. However, to your question, would we design a route that would avoid a structure, a residential, or even a commercial structure? Yeah, that's right. We would seek to avoid that.
Okay, now let's go back a little bit to when the pipeline would be, the construction aspect of the, blasting. Okay, so you're in the neighborhood and you're blasting and you're trying to avoid being right next to a house, but there's still all this blasting going on. What kind of plan do you have to protect? We've talked a bit about the wells and all, but what kind of plan do you have to protect, the residents that would be there, the roads that are already built there, people's driveways, and I guess back to one thing Ms. Perkins said, foundations, because if you really go out and you look, if you want to walk around our neighborhoods and see what happens just without that, you're going to see cracks. You're going to see things that already are having issues. So how do you go about, when you're doing all this, blasting, what protection or what do you have in place to deal with those kind of issues?
Yeah, let me say preliminarily, and Joe can talk about blasting procedures, but the vast majority of the route will be trench dug, so we don't anticipate a major amount of blasting.
Well, I think the problem is that there's a lot of rock and we who live here have experienced, that kind of thing, like when the old Blacksburg High School that is no longer a high school, why we're here tonight, when that was blasted out, the rock went everywhere. So I guess, I sort of want to know, like, I'm trying to envision, like, okay, I'm pretending I live in Preston Forest and the blasting is going on right outside my house, but my house isn't going to be taken, but it's right outside here, and I'm just wondering how everything around there is going to be protected from cracking and that kind of thing. And then if it's not, do you go back and shore up the foundations? I think that was asked earlier. What do you do when there's damage that's done? Or even the roads, driveways, I don't know.
When we're talking about blasting, we're talking about very small charges. It's just to break up the rock in the ditch. We've blasted within 10 feet of another live pipeline. We're not talking about blasting where, there's dirt coming out and rocks flying out.
So these are just little blasts. Okay, and you sort of get it going and maybe hope it works out. And I come from an elementary school background, so I like to get the picture in my brain of what's going on. And I'm not trying to be facetious, I'm trying to understand. Okay, that sort of leads to, I guess I sort of want to go to this, I want to know where this gas is going. Where is it going to go?
The question comes up a lot, whether we intend to export the gas. And the number one, as I had mentioned before, we don't take title to it, so it's not our gas. We are not constructing this project for the purpose of exporting gas. There are federal policies. It actually is of no benefit to us to export gas. There is sufficient demand within the U.S. and increasing demand within the U.S. to provide for this gas. Now, I do want to make clear, if somebody wanted to put gas on that pipe and was authorized to export it, we couldn't stop it.
All right, so when you mentioned in your presentation then that this would bring economic development to the areas that are along the line, specifically tell me how it's going to bring economic development to our county.
Sure.
Besides, maybe people get hired and trained to construct it, how is it going to bring economic development to Montgomery County?
Sure. Well, as Chris mentioned before, natural gas is the future of the energy industry, and there will be industry, manufacturing that will locate where natural gas is located. This really is kind of the analogy would be to a highway. And I know we've talked about that before. You build a highway, and when the demand is there, there are exits built. And we have the ability through this pipe and the route that it goes to provide natural gas to areas along that route. And that in itself is an economic development opportunity for the communities that we pass through. We've already heard from some of the communities that we've talked to of examples, and Chris mentioned it before, examples of businesses that natural gas is paramount to their business, and if they want to expand, having access to natural gas or trying to expand their business and needing a redundant service for natural gas is very important. So that, yes, there are going to be temporary jobs and impact to the local businesses as the construction happens, but more importantly, it provides an opportunity for the future for any area that this pipeline will pass through. And we can take, we call them taps off of these lines where the opportunity presents itself. If you have a power generation facility that is going to be modernized and changed from some other form of fuel to natural gas along this route, we have that opportunity. So it provides for a myriad of different opportunities. A lot of them economic development opportunities just from having natural gas present and available to local communities. I will tell you, and we, Chris mentioned NextEra is based in Florida. We come from a company called Florida Power Lights, where our roots began. Our company has done a lot to transition to natural gas, and we've invested a lot of money into the economy in Florida, modernizing our plants from oil to gas to natural gas. We have been over the last several years the largest investor in the state of Florida from an economic perspective, and we're also at the same time we're doing that, reducing our emissions profile. We have one of the cleanest emissions profiles in the country. Chris mentioned NextEra Energy being the leader in renewable energy. Well, we've dropped our emissions profile considerably. We are much better than the industry average, and a lot of that comes from our change to natural gas. And so, again, power plants that are along this route may have the opportunity to modernize and move to natural gas, and that in itself is an economic development opportunity.
But you're saying you would allow people to tap in?
Yeah, again, if the demand is there, that opportunity does exist. It has to be planned appropriately. I mean, the economic development agencies, the potential users of that gas would need to, figure out where that opportunity is and where we would best do that. But yes.
Okay, and I might have stepped on some supervisor's toes by taking a question, but I want to tell you why I'm asking that.
Sure.
Because in my mind, I'm trying to balance what I'm hearing about going through people's neighborhood and things that can happen as far as safety. I'm trying to balance that with what kind of benefit there is. And I think you answered my question. Thank you.
And the other thing I didn't mention is that, the tax revenue from the value of the pipe that's in the ground along the communities that it runs.
We have a gentleman in the back with some questions, and could staff look around to see whether there's any more cards out there with questions to be picked up. There's some hands that's up here, and there's a gentleman in the back, and if we got questions that's coming forward to be asked later, raise your hand so staff can collect them. Now, my question is that you intend to compensate people where the line is going on their property. What about the people that's property that's in proximity, that the line is not in the right of way or whatever, but it's right next to it? Would those people receive any kind of compensation for the diminished value of their homes?
Typically, no. The compensation is based upon the easement. So, no, that would be an unusual circumstance.
But
Okay. All right, we've talked about property. We've talked about property values. We've talked about the safety. We've talked about being concerned with damaging people's homes, the value of their land. We've talked about, we brought up a little bit about say it again?
Seismic activity.
Seismic activity. I don't know what's wrong with me, but nevertheless, I'm really concerned then, what led you to this road? Why this road? If you're not talking about any seismic activity, if you're not discussing all these other things, and you don't know about the karst land, and you don't know about damaging water or the aquifers or anything else, what led you to use this land? And then I'm going to follow up to that, please.
And it's not the land, it is the route. And we were looking to go from an abundant area of supply into a facility that had the ability to move the gas to market. And that's why we interconnected to the Transco facility. So it wasn't, and I want to just kind of restate, what we don't know now, we will learn. And this is extremely early in the process. And we always run this risk. We come out, we want to be open. We want to talk to people. We understand that people have concerns, and we want to hear about it. And we want to hear about things that are specific, not just to the area, but specific to the parcel. So it's, you know, a lot of, we hope to avoid frustration because we don't have all the information, but it's still so extremely early in the process that it's just unavoidable.
Well, we don't have all the information either. And what happens when you look at all these things you say that you're not really quite sure of, and even FERC says, sorry, you can't put it through there, what are you going to do?
Well, if FERC doesn't approve the project doesn't get built.
Doesn't say you can't do it?
FERC ultimately is the authority, you know, through that process that I described, to either issue or deny a certificate, and FERC can deny the certificate. And if they do that, we can't build.
Okay, that leads me to this question. How many pipelines are currently proposed to be going through Virginia? 2 or 3?
I believe 3.
How many?
3.
Right. I saw in the newspaper that Dominion and the company they have they've done their pre-filing.
That's correct.
Then you've got the one that's Mid-Atlantic, or at least we know about the Mid-Atlantic, and then yours is the Mountain Valley. These pipelines, now I'm not quite sure about Dominion's, but the pipeline for your proposal and the other proposal, they start in the same place and they end up in the same place. Why is it that you think we need 3 pipelines going through Virginia? Now, I'm very serious. I'm serious because I don't know.
Yep, I understand. That's a good question. So our pipeline will have the ability to move between 2 billion cubic feet and 2.5. Probably there's of a similar nature. There is adequate supply to fill those pipes, and there is adequate demand from all of the individual sectors that we have referenced to purchase that. There is a demand, and there is an increasing demand for natural gas.
Well, I know you said that in your presentation, but the pipelines that are going through, yours is the biggest. What happened with the rest of them? Why are they smaller than yours if they know that there's great gas located wherever it is? Might they want to come back and put 4 or 5 pipelines through Virginia?
I mean, that's a commercial decision that they have. They go out like we do for what they call an open season, and they get expressions of interest.
But okay, would you? I mean, you want to come back and put a second pipeline in?
That's not our plan, no. We would, you know, if we were to come back and do an additional, that would be an entirely new project. Now, and let me say, when we're talking about, I can't opine on why they would do that, but, you know, everybody has their commercial tolerance. Yeah, no, I mean, obviously, you know, just our company, NextEra, since 2003, we've completed over 90 major infrastructure projects, and we've invested $23 billion. And you know, we're not trying to hide the fact that we are in the business of developing energy infrastructure. And we're proud of the job we've done and the economic benefits that have been attendant to those projects.
Well, you know, I understand that has to do with the economy and a lot of other things. Has to do with your being in business to make a profit and supply gas. What I'm really having problems with is if these are going through Virginia, and I know you just answered this question, but I didn't quite get the answer, and it's going to the southeast, and we've talked about, as this big, people can tap into it. I'm asking, is this just going across Virginia because we just happen to be located here, and we are not going to really get the benefit? I know what you said, for economically, that, you know, it's going to bring in other businesses and all sorts of stuff. But, you know, enough is enough. And it's just, really, I want to know, you know, there are 3 now pipelines going through Virginia. And I think that it's very difficult for me to understand why another pipeline is really necessary. Thank you.
I believe one of you had mentioned the economic impacts and benefits to our area, but the pipeline is running through, or at least as it's proposed, is running through Preston Forest, which you wouldn't expect an industrial park to go in there. It then goes into a rural area that there's no major water supplies to be able to generate power, steam along those lines to be able to turn the turbines. There is no economic benefit that I can see for this land to go through Montgomery County, because where it's going, it's nowhere near anything where we're going to be able to build industries. It's not in any of our plans in the next 50 years to do anything like that. So when you're saying economic benefit for Montgomery County, can you please explain how this is going to be an economic benefit for Montgomery County?
And this is one of the reasons that we're having these conversations. I mean, we need to know from your perspective where those opportunities are. And like Chris said, we're developing the route now. This is a long conversation. This is why the process is set up to be this robust, to have these conversations, and you all learn from us and we learn from you on what the opportunities are. Unless we have those conversations, then we won't know what those opportunities are. That's why we've come here to talk about that. And we have, like I said, we've heard from other counties that there are opportunities in that regard. So we need to explore those opportunities with you all and understand what your thoughts are on that.
Mr. Gray.
Yes. You know, I want to get off of my question here just for a second, and say this. Before any of the 3 of the pipelines that are headed to the beach area, to the big ships where they can take it out, before any of that happened, Montgomery County already had 2 gas pipelines. I don't see anybody flocking to them. Now, what I do want to know is, what will happen to my grandchildren and your grandchildren when you take all of our gas, all of our natural resources in gas, and you pump it out, and you take and put 42-inch hole that will go from one end of the country up in the north all the way to the beach, and load it then down to the big boat haulers, or not boats, but they're ships. Export ships, I guess. What do you think is going to happen when you sell off all the gas that we have, and these other countries are holding on to theirs and buying ours right now, and suddenly we're the one who's got to make the pay for it to come back our way, because they were smart enough to keep theirs?
You know, again, we're not building this for the export of gas. However,
I hope you think you're Johnson.
You know, honestly, I don't, number one. But number two, frankly, that's just a larger federal policy question than the four of us are equipped to handle. There has been, to my knowledge, the federal government has permitted one facility for export. I don't know whether that was a good idea. I don't know whether it was a bad idea. But what I do know is because of low cost, cleaner fuel, we are attracting manufacturing jobs back to the United States, and we are lowering our emission profile. So when we talk about our kids, I have kids, you know, what we're providing them is a better economy and a cleaner environment.
Yeah. I'll get to my question. During the construction of the pipeline, will there be limits on how early or late that your people can work around inhabited houses?
Yes, there will. There will be many restrictions contained within the permits, both seasonal and time of day.
And who would enforce this?
During construction, FERC. And actually, it wouldn't be limited to FERC, it actually would be state agencies as well.
Thank you. That's all I'm asking.
Okay, Mr. King.
I think several of us asked this question, but I'd like to get a straight answer. What is the destination for the gas being transported through the pipeline? Where is it actually going?
Yeah, it terminates at the Transco system at their Station 165 in Pennsylvania County.
But where does it go from there?
It can be sold anywhere onto that system. The Transco system goes all the way up, I believe, to New York.
How big are your pipes when you sell off the gas? I know you can't take it out of the 42 inch because that's not a distributed pipe.
This particular pipeline, of course, is a higher pressure transmission line. And in order to take gas off of this line, it's going to require for you to step down that pressure into smaller lines that can then be placed in the communities for residential or for commercial use. So it would actually be a much smaller line under much less pressure.
Do you know what size these are? I mean,
and that would vary. As Max talked about a few minutes ago about the opportunities, it's going to depend on the quantity and on the quantity of gas that is needed in that area. So the pipeline size could vary. I've seen those lines be anywhere from 6 to 10 inches.
I think he was talking about the Transco line, how big that line was it was going to. Is that what you're talking about?
no.
Okay.
Here, the transport line.
Yeah, the line that this line is going into down at Halifax, I believe, or Pennsylvania County. Pennsylvania County. This 42-inch line is going into, I guess, Transco's line. And it could go north, or it could go south, or it could go both. And you have any idea what size that line, their line is?
You're correct. It could go both directions once it gets into the Transco line. I am not sure of the actual size of the Transco line. It's obviously a significant size, but it's also a transmission line.
Okay, we've talked a lot about FERC. Can you tell me which state regulatory authorities must grant their permission for this pipeline to proceed? Is there anything that you have to get specifically from the state?
Yes, there are. It would be, typically states have their own version of a NEPA process, It would deal with things like the Department of Environmental Protection that a state would have for air permits, the historic resources, right down to municipal building permits. So those are all included in a bundle of permits underneath the NEPA process.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask another question? You said something about municipal building permits?
Yeah, any permit that's required, we have to comply with. It does come underneath that NEPA process, though. That will be a cooperating agency that ultimately comes under the FERC umbrella.
Okay, not to deviate, but say coming through Montgomery County, you'd have to apply for a building permit to put in that pipeline?
I don't know whether it will be a building permit per se, but it would be
A construction permit?
the appropriate permits within each jurisdiction.
Well, what if the jurisdiction refused to issue you a permit?
Ultimately, FERC does have the jurisdiction to override those refusals.
So it means that FERC is the ultimate authority. So if Montgomery County, for example, refused to issue a construction permit or whatever type of permit, I guess FERC could probably tell us to issue it all.
Yeah, that's correct. And that's in an instance where a permit is unreasonably withheld. So all permits have, all jurisdictions, all requirements have, specific guidelines. And any infrastructure project has to follow those guidelines. If we follow those guidelines and a permit is still withheld, yes, there is a federal preemption to that.
And that includes state, too.
That does include state, yes.
Okay, you have, and I don't know about this question. You have a line going through Montgomery County, and maybe our attorney could help us. Do we have to write as a county to tax them on that line running through this county?
No, I believe the SEC.
Yeah, yes. The answer to that is yes, you do have the authority. It would be taxed. Typically, a taxing authority has a millage rate specific to utility infrastructure, and that's typically the way it's taxed.
Okay. After the FERC open house in December, how will pipeline officials keep the community and the Board of Supervisors updated on the pipeline's progress? And another follow-up to that, will someone from the pipeline company attend quarterly meetings of the Board of Supervisors to keep us updated on that progress? I mean, what I'm saying is that after this meeting and the FERC meeting, are we going to be left out in the cold? Or somebody's going to come and communicate with us?
No, we will be here communicating. Just one point of clarification, the open houses in December are company run. So a FERC representative will be at those open houses, but those are the company run open houses. The FERC, official FERC meetings, they call them scoping meetings, will happen sometime in the spring. Those will be, as Chris alluded to earlier, more of a presentation format from the FERC project manager, an opportunity for public comment. And then there's a series of steps throughout the process for continued further public comment, but we will be in touch with all of the counties along the route to keep them apprised, and any meetings you all have interest in having us be at, we'll find a way to have someone there.
Okay, because
also we have a project website as well, so all of the information on the website, frequently asked questions, detailed maps, all of that kind of information is on our website, and that website will be updated along the route of the project as well.
But we specifically would appreciate somebody coming at least quarterly to keep us, the board, and our citizens updated.
We will make that happen.
Okay. Now, let me ask this question. All I hear about the FERC meeting is December. you have any idea when FERC will be coming to do their citizens like meeting in December?
Well, no, their meetings are not in December. Our company-run open houses start in December in Virginia and go through West Virginia in January. The FERC scoping meetings will be sometime in the spring. There's a series of steps along the process, at one point they will issue their kind of notification that they've moved into the scoping process. That's the point at which they would tell us when those meetings would occur, but we're not to that point yet.
Okay. One of the things that concerns me is what kind of inspection, what kind of people from your companies will be here. Will they be here 24/7 while the pipeline is being constructed in order to keep people from tampering with what is going on, so that there will not be some unfortunate explosions or whatever with that. I also follow up to that. I just want to know how are you going to have, is it a lot of large equipment that needs to be brought in here when you're constructing this? And again, will there be somebody on that site to 24/7 to make certain that people do not come along and tamper with it?
Well, typically, when we talk about inspection, the company will have inspectors that inspect the construction job, and the people that put the pipeline in or go through a program that's required by DOT, operator qualification, to make sure they're qualified to put the pipeline in. As far as somebody 24/7, that's normally not what we do. They usually work a regular shift during the day, maybe up to 12 hours. We don't normally have somebody on site 24/7.
So someone could come in the middle of the night and tamper with it, and you all would not know about it until the next morning?
The other thing you said about explosion, the pipeline won't have gas in it until it's completely built and gets pressure tested. So there's not a possibility of an explosion. It's not going to have natural gas in it.
Oh, I understand that, but I'm just simply saying that a construction inspection and any tampering and safety need is there it's out there 24/7, and you never know what might occur.
Yeah. I mean, typically, we put in a lot of pipelines in our company, a lot of transmission lines. Typically, we have not had a problem with vandalism during off hours.
Let me hit her with that question. You got this 150-foot easement through there that's all tore up. How do you, what I'm saying, with not somebody there all the time, how do you protect the children in the neighborhood that's playing in the evening after school, or through the summer, or on weekends, pets, and things like that, you know, around this equipment?
I mean, it depends on where we're working as to where we'll store the equipment. We're not going to leave it in a residential neighborhood. We may leave it out on a site if we're working out in a very rural area. You know, all the equipment gets locked up.
Yeah, but I mean, and I know what she and I are concerned about is that if you do go through Preston Forest, there's a lot of children up there. There's a lot of pets, and people walk and things like this. And when you have a 6 or 7 year old you don't know where he or she may stray and playing with their friends, especially if you're going to be close to their homes.
Yeah, I mean, in those type of areas, in residential areas, we plate any open ditch, we backfill. The ditch up to where we're working, we would plate any open holes. We put warning tape around the area. I mean, we don't leave anything open for somebody to come and fall in the ditch.
I'm still concerned about what happens when you're not there.
I think that's a fair concern. I mean, the truth is, we build energy infrastructure on an ongoing basis, every day, every year. And we always take appropriate caution, and we will alter that according to a scenario like you talked about. If we're in an area that has a higher incident of residences where there may be children, we will be aware of that. Our construction people are the contractors. This is what they do.
You had mentioned that you had looked at some of the other presentations, and the neighborhood that I live in Walton has the Tennessee gas line coming through it, and no one in my subdivision is allowed to tap into that because that's a transmission line. And you had talked about benefit of this line, and so is it fair to say that no one in Preston Forest is going to be able to tap into this and utilize this gas line in any way to heat their homes, to provide gas? Is that correct?
No, it's not fair to say that ultimately they can't access natural gas for the benefit of their home. It is fair to say, you cannot have a direct interconnect from an interstate pipeline into a home. It requires a local distribution company.
Which is the same in my neighborhood, but the problem is the local distribution company is 10 miles away, so in effect, this gas line will not be able to benefit anybody in that subdivision. Is that correct?
No, I disagree with that. I disagree with that. As the demand for natural gas, be it in your community, be it in expansive communities, that's what local distribution companies do. They seek to expand their territory to serve homes like yours, and the availability of a wholesale gas product enables them to do that.
And
I mean, can I assure you all, I'm sorry, sir.
Are you familiar with Preston Forest? These are 5-acre lots.
Yes.
And if it's similar to, if it's very, I still can't use cable. I don't know if out Preston Forest they can use cable or not, but it's very difficult. And so you're saying that a gas company is going to deliver gas to 5-acre lots out in a rural area of our community?
No, I understand what you're saying. I don't know their thresholds for demand. What I'm saying is it makes a product available for that type of service. Whether ultimately they don't see economic benefit in that, it kind of goes to what Max was saying. It's the same with industry. It provides an opportunity that doesn't currently exist.
Well, but going back to my, in reality, there is not any benefit to any of those folks that are going to be out in that Preston Forest area.
You know, quite frankly, we're talking past each other. We just have to agree to disagree. I see opportunity. I live in an area where there's a pipeline. I take gas. As I said, 25% of households are using natural gas, and that is expanding. And as that expands, the distribution into areas like yours will expand.
You said 25%, but you're talking about urban areas that are utilizing gas products, not in rural areas where you're talking about areas spread out because it's not economically feasible for the local companies to build those gas lines out there.
No, I understand that. It is part of the mandate of FERC to expand natural gas. I understand what you're saying, and I'm not disagreeing with you. If there isn't a sufficient economic benefit to a local distribution company, then yeah, I mean, if it's not there today, then it has to happen over time. I understand that. I am not saying to you, just let me make this clear, that when a natural gas transmission line comes to an area, does it automatically mean that people are going to hook up? No. No, it's an opportunity.
I mean,
I won't take that.
I don't make them jump in our butt.
but I heard you say you see it as an opportunity. And I guess probably if I was sitting in your shoes and I lived elsewhere and I was getting a pretty good profit off of it, I would see it as an opportunity too. But we here in Montgomery County do not see it as an opportunity. We see it as disrupting what we treasure here in this county. So we can have a difference of opinions on what's opportunity and what's not, because we don't see a lot of employment here. We might see probably when you come to with your construction team, maybe a few laborers on the job, but I think you could bring in companies that was reputable and knew what they were doing, who built pipelines all over the United States. And when those companies would be here in the county, they might be staying here eating in the restaurant, but when they moved on to the next county, they would be gone. And I don't know how many, or even if you even employ local people to sort of maintain the easement, or whether you have drones flying around, you know, watching the easement, I mean, it's just, it's hard for me to sort of grasp what opportunities are in for us. Mr. Tuck talked about where that line is going. There's no infrastructure for industry to develop there. There's no water. And sometimes it's on a cliff or on a mountain or somewhere like that. There's not even a suitable building spot for a company to locate here in the county. So I just wanted to mention that we can have a difference of opinions about opportunity, what is opportunity and what is not. And I think it depends on where we're sitting at and where you're sitting at, whether it's opportunity or not.
One question.
Okay, come on.
You know, we've been sitting here talking about FERC, and you're saying FERC has the final decision as to where the pipeline goes and whether it will go. My question is, has FERC ever disproved?
Yes, they have. They have denied projects.
The
permitting, and I will say this, I always say this about permitting processes in general, be it the FERC process, the NEPA process. FERC's mandate is to expand the availability of natural gas. FERC generally wants to approve projects. There are guidelines that they have to follow. If it's not the right project, if it is not designed and cited properly, yeah, FERC will deny the project.
Well, may I just go ahead and say something? As a former government teacher, I have dealt with many times agencies of the federal government and talked with my students about them. But you're saying then that FERC is unusual in that it just doesn't rubber stamp what you want or what a company wants, but they will actually say, oh no, it can't be there. Yeah, and then what do you do?
I am saying that. I mean, it's a process that includes a lot of other agencies of various jurisdictions. So whether, I sense you're kind of questioning FERC, whether they would do it, and I think you're saying...
I'm just saying, with your knowledge of what's going on, are you aware of whether or not FERC really investigates this, or do they rubber stamp it?
No, I believe they investigated. I do believe there's integrity in the process.
Okay. So what you're saying then is we should be lobbying FERC, not you.
Well, and that's really what this process is all about. I mean, people are already lobbying FERC. They're filing comments, and so yeah, that is the process is to comment to FERC, and in essence, that is lobbying FERC, yes.
Okay. Excuse me.
Okay, Mr. Gray.
All right. One of my constituents wants to know and by the way, I'm on the other end of Montgomery County, wants to know if the company will pledge to stay within the power line easements, such as on Bradshaw Road.
No, we can't pledge to any specifics of the route right now. The only thing we will pledge to do is we want to co-locate to the greatest extent possible, but it has to work throughout the entirety of the line. So, you know, we may have to avoid a sensitive area that then makes it not feasible to co-locate with that particular parcel.
Okay. Now, the other one that I have is, do all of your transmission lines for Montgomery County go through easements owned by Appalachian Power? And I'm speaking about the ones in Blacksburg and out towards Giles.
Did you say in Montgomery County?
Montgomery County, and yes.
I think I misunderstand the question. Are you talking about our MVP proposed project?
I'm talking about what I understand to be your favorite route to go through, coming out of Giles, coming into Montgomery County.
And so I'm sorry, I apologize. So are we fully co-located? Is that the question?
Yeah, the question is, are you going to use Appalachian Power lines as far as the right-of-way that they have?
Presently, it's not exclusively that, but again, it's our effort to co-locate to the greatest extent possible. And there, you know, where we're not doing it, there are reasons that are unique to the adjoining parcels or anything, or the overall route that makes that not feasible.
Okay, can you tell me how wide is an Appalachian Power easement coming through that area?
No, I can't tell you offhand. I'm sure it's I think it's a 765 line, so it's got to be at least a couple hundred feet.
What out here, 138?
138, double circle. 100.
So, if this be the case, once we cut that in two, because you can only go on one side of it, we're down to 50 to 60 feet. And I understand that's not enough for you.
Again, I don't think, we are seeking easements of 70 feet. So I think you're saying if we were to be in that easement, would we need more property? I honestly, it would obviously depend upon where we located in there, and AEP would have to be in agreement with that. So there are a lot of discussions to be had.
So y'all really not looked at that piece of land over yet, and a form to where you can really tell how much land is there to have an easement on? And,
we have looked at that easement. We've looked at the entire easement. And
so how much is it on one side of that easement?
I'm sorry, I personally do not know. I know we're looking at that easement. I don't know the specifics of that easement.
Who looked at it?
I'm sorry, I personally have not looked at it. That's correct.
Oh, I thought you just said you did look at it.
No, sir. Our company has looked at it. Our land folks, our folks that are responsible for siting the line have looked at that. We're aware of its existence, and that easement and other easements, to the greatest extent possible, we would like to co-locate.
And where that's at has a whole lot to do with just how close to these houses you're going to be getting, and that would be good information for not just us, but for you and for them to know.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. King, do you have a question?
We talked about the inspection of the pipeline as it was being constructed. But who inspects and monitors the pipeline during operation after the construction?
We have an operations personnel that we do different types of inspections. We patrol the pipeline at various periods. We will patrol the entire pipeline twice a year, and then we go back and do the road crossings another 2 times a year. We use aerial patrols, and we use foot patrols. We leak survey the line at those same times. We do valve inspections just to make sure the valves are in operations. We do those every year. We read cathodic protection test stations on an annual basis to make sure that the cathodic protection system is working. We read rectifiers 6 times a year. And that's also to ensure that cathodic protection is working. But to answer your question, yeah, the operations folks go out and do the monitoring and inspection.
Now, do they work for you or do they work for DOT?
No, they work for us. They work for EQT. No, DOT does periodic inspections of our company. In fact, we just went through a 7-week inspection this year. So they'll come in and they'll look at our records, look at our procedures, look at our facilities, and evaluate them.
Can I follow up a little bit? Now, the inspectors work for you guys?
Well, yeah, the people that go out and inspect the pipeline and monitor the pipeline work for our company.
I mean,
that's their operations person.
What I'm talking about is the construction. Is somebody there standing on site to make sure that that joint is welded together. I mean, that's independent from your company. Somebody maybe from FERC or somewhere like that, or DOT or somewhere.
Well,
some independent person that doesn't work for you guys, that's not on your payroll, that's standing there looking in that hole to make sure that that joint is sealed and so forth.
A watchdog.
Yeah, a watchdog.
There are FERC inspectors on site.
On site?
DOT inspections occur periodically. They'll come out and on a job of this magnitude, I'm sure we'll get DOT inspectors out doing inspections on the pipeline construction.
Yeah, and see, I asked that question for a reason, and the reason is that at one of our schools we just built, and the way the pipe we're putting in, we had a couple water leaks, and the way, and the inspectors signed off on it. So we had a lot of conversations about, was they physically there signed off, or did they just rubber stamped what they thought was good? And so, and we've had some experiences with some poor inspections years ago, I guess on our high school and so old high school. So we don't want to have poor inspections or no inspections on this gas line if it comes through here.
And I can tell you, as an example, welding. We have qualified welders. They go through our qualification process on our procedure to make sure they understand our procedure and follow our procedure. We have weld inspection out at the site. And then on top of that, the welds are x-rayed by a non-destructive technician. It's got to be at least a level 2. And so we ensure that those welds pass inspection before they're approved.
Now, how often do you inspect them? I mean, is there any way you can go inside and check the welds?
That's what the radiograph does. It takes a picture of the entire well.
How often do you do that?
Every well.
I mean, how often? How many times a year?
I think you're talking about
after the pipe's completed.
Yeah, during operation, looking at the integrity of the inside of the pipe.
That's running an intelligent inspection tool that checks for corrosion, checks for dents. Under the integrity management rule, in certain areas, highly populated areas, you're required to do that every 7 years. But here's the way our pipelines are set up. We don't just do it in those high consequence areas. We do the entire pipeline.
I'm going to pass on the interest of time because I know our audience has been really patient and we have a lot of questions that have been turned in, and I also know that Mr. Tuck has some questions that he's worked really hard on. So from my viewpoint, I thank you for answering my questions. I know that you've been in the hot seat tonight, and we know what that feels like too. And thank you for, for coming and for answering and trying your best. And I'm going to pass to Mr. Tuck.
Thank you. A couple of questions. Both of you had indicated that you had gotten a demand for this gas, and there was a demand. Can you tell me a single customer here in Montgomery County, or even in our adjoining counties, that have signed up and said, we're going to purchase gas from you?
No, I can't. We're out talking with the individual counties now.
And as far as...
And I also would like to say, I mean, it is very early in the process. I do want to reiterate that.
Is it correct that part of the gas, or one of the targets, is to sell gas to Duke Power down in North Carolina?
I'm not aware of that specifically, but that wouldn't be, we wouldn't avoid that.
Will the FERC regulations require you to keep this within this company, or will it be allowed to be put into a shell corporation or a subsidiary, provide you limited liability protections in case of a catastrophic event? Yeah,
the FERC certificate will require that we have adequate protection, and it is a partnership. Mountain Valley Pipeline is a partnership between our two companies. FERC does make sure, they do ensure that there's a financial integrity of that organization.
What you used the word adequate. What is adequate?
It depends upon the value of the line.
So the line is $3 billion.
Yes, I don't know the answer to the if you're saying, it's not like insuring a car. So you say I have $20,000. It's, they will consider and I don't have the answer to exactly what that number is.
In regards to, would your companies agree not to use herbicides and rather use manual labor, bush hogging the easement instead of spraying? Would you agree to that in writing?
It's part of the permitting process, and it's also specific to each property. I will say we're not committing to anything right now. We want to do it in the most environmentally sound manner possible. We go through this on electric transmission lines. It really is the preference of individual jurisdictions.
So if we asked you not to use herbicides, and that was something very important to us because we've got this thing running through a subdivision, is that something that you would be agreeable to in writing, and saying that you would use manual labor machines rather than herbicides?
Yeah, I don't see why we would have any objection to that. I mean, we would like to talk to you about that further.
Mary mentioned the compressor stations. What type of compression engines are you planning on utilizing? Are you natural gas or electric? Or
most likely natural gas, but the final design has not been made yet.
How many compressors will be at each station? Do you know?
Yeah, no, we don't know yet. That'll depend upon the final design.
And in regards to the depth, you had indicated 3 feet. Sometimes in the agricultural areas, at least from what research I've done, it goes deeper. How wide a hole are you going to be cutting to accommodate a 42-inch pipe, to be able to get it in there again and work? How deep are we talking about, and why?
You're probably talking about 42-inch pipe, probably 3 feet on each side of that.
Now, and I know you're saying you're not from the area, and you don't know about the rocky nature of basically Brush Mountain. Are you aware that, and my dad told me this, that there used to be coal mines in that area back in the 1940s and 50s, and there may be mine shafts underneath this area, and what effects would your blasting have on those old mines the old coal mines that were on Brush Mountain?
We will become aware of those during our environmental survey.
Is it fair to say that's the first time you realized that there were coal mines on Brush Mountain?
It's fair to say that this is the first time I've realized a lot of stuff. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, this is a large magnitude project, and we are in the very preliminary stages. So, I had said this at the outset. We want to provide information, and we don't want to create frustration, but we want to be here early. So, in all honesty, I think some of those questions are unfair.
I guess that's the difference. Mary's much nicer than I am. She's a school teacher and I'm a lawyer, so
no, I understand that.
A couple of things. Let's say that this, as far as, would you consider rerouting the line to go more in the national forest to avoid the Preston Forest area, even if that meant lengthening your pipeline? Because obviously if you went to the northeast direction to avoid that, you stayed within the national forest for an extended period or a period of time, and then cut more over into Roanoke County and more rural areas of Montgomery County.
That's a possibility.
How likely is that possibility?
It would depend upon what the condition of the property that we rerouted to be was. So, as I said to you, a reroute affects beyond just that community that you mentioned. It affects miles of the pipe. So it's the scenarios that you put out, it's just not possible for me to answer because I don't know what you're asking us to reroute to. If it is a more benign route, yeah, we would reroute.
The reason I asked about staying in the national forest, obviously, I guess this is, in my opinion, if this pipeline is going to be benefiting anybody, it might be on a national scale, but it doesn't appear to be benefiting us even in our region. And so if it was going to go in through the national forest, perhaps that you could work with them. Perhaps you could, I was listening to an article about the monarch butterflies and need to plant more milkweed to be able to sustain it. But utilize that and try to work with it. And I've got the experience from my family having a transmission line. We've used that for hunting. We've used that for recreational purposes. But when you're putting it through someone's subdivision that's existing where they've got their dream houses, and that's a totally different situation.
No, I understand the general premise of your line of questioning, and we do want to be sensitive to that. Where I have a difficulty is a specific will you reroute to this area, because we are now just learning what the specifics of those areas are.
As you've seen, and you said you had watched some of the presentations, we had some folks came, Virginia Tech professors, talking about the blast radius that would occur if one of these lines exploded. I believe around 2,000 feet, give or take. It especially would be on conditions as far as terrain as well as wind. Do you have any of your information to say if one of these things blows up, what's the blast radius for a 42-inch pipeline? And then is there, my understanding from, there's a blast, but there is also a shock wave that will be created from that blast. And if you have that information, that would be helpful.
I don't. I can talk about potential impact radius, which it's part of integrity management. It's called potential impact radius. And it is a circle. There's a formula that you put the pressure and diameter in that tells you what the potential impact radius is if you would have eruption. I haven't done the calculations for a 42-inch pipe.
1,200 feet. Well, that's all the questions I have. Thank you very much. I appreciate you involving me.
Okay, and we, the board, we still have questions. And just think about this question, sir, when you said some of the questions that we asked was unfair. Just leave it at that, and because we think they were fair. And we're going to give the audience a chance to stand up and stretch for a minute, and then what we're going to do is go into the questions that you all submitted on your cards, and we're going to have staff, our staff, to pull those questions out and read them. So if you want to stretch for a minute or two, go ahead and stretch. And the same thing for our board members. And then we're going to jump right into those questions. Now, we're going to save the remainder of our meeting to try to get to as many questions as possible that has been submitted from you guys out there. Now, when our staff get to a question that has been
answered up here between our exchange or in our presentation, we're going to ask them to go on to another question, or if they would like to read it, and or one of the members here said, well, we've already asked that. But I want to try to focus on the questions that we haven't gotten to from up here and get to the questions that you all have submitted. And let me see. And even during this part, if you're sitting in the audience and you think of another question, just raise your hand and staff will bring you a card for you to write your question during this period and get it back over to the table. So I think we're ready to go, and I think Ruth and Chris will alternate in reading the questions.
Okay, first question. Why can't the route follow the route of interstates or existing highways such as US 460, I-81, or I-77?
There isn't a reason why they can't. There's no particular reason to avoid a roadway. It just, again, has to do with the rest of the route. So the route kind of falls in its totality. So in an effort to avoid or be the least impactful as possible, in certain circumstances won't put us next to another infrastructure project, be it a road or be it co-locating on another utility infrastructure. So that's the only reason. It's not that there's a particular reason to avoid it.
How long does it take to push gas through the pipeline to the coast?
Depending upon the pressure of the pipe natural gas will move between 10 and 15 miles an hour. So, 20 hours. Thank you. 20 hours. I would have embarrassed myself.
Sorry, we have a lot of repeats in here.
Has EQT ever built a 42-inch pipeline that is 300 miles long before?
No.
Well, let me follow up on it real quick. What is the largest pipeline that you've ever built other than this one that you're proposing to build?
We have some 30-inch pipelines. A lot of our transmission systems were put in the 80s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. I don't know what the longest that was done at one time. I know we've done a 33-mile pipeline just recently.
Okay. When will EQT NextEra announce the number, size, and location of compressor facilities along the 300-mile pipeline route?
We expect when the route is finalized, I had said probably sometime in the April-May timeframe, that will allow us to have greater certainty in the design of it and then consequently the location of those compressor facilities.
Have any of your pipeline projects ever been halted or canceled due to EPA regulations, endangered species, or other federal environmental protections?
Not that we're aware of.
What will be the negative impact on Montgomery County if the pipeline does not go through?
Let's be honest, this is perhaps an area of discussion that we've had in, I believe it to be a lost opportunity cost to access natural gas.
How far apart are the safety valves and how many cubic feet of gas does that mean are potentially, released accidentally?
I can answer it about the safety valve. I don't know what the design is on the pipeline. We're still very early. But by DOT code, there are limits on, depending on what's called class location, which involves population density, as to how far apart you can have valves. Typically, we have valves maybe 4 miles, 8 miles apart.
Would compensation for the landowners cover the entire property or just a specific piece of land attached directly by easement expansion?
It is, according to the value of the property, it is the easement, and then if there is a corresponding loss of use, that's how it will be determined.
May I do a follow-up question? Let's say that the easement is here, and you've got a larger tract. Let's say you've got 4 acres here, and it ends up cutting off a portion of it that makes that smaller portion unbuildable. Will you go ahead and condemn and pay the landowner for the smaller tract of land that they can no longer build upon or utilize?
A scenario like that would be considered on a case-by-case basis.
Will the gas line likely increase homeowners' insurance rates because of potential fire hazards?
No.
How close to a well can you put the gas line?
How close to a well? May tie into natural gas.
I think you're talking about water. Yeah, I mean, it would depend upon the source, really. I mean,
the source is the water.
Yeah, no, I understand. If you're talking about, I mean, for instance, water bodies, a navigable waterway, for instance, you know, we can directionally drill right under it with 4 feet of cover. So, you know, we can be adjacent to a well.
Will EQT NextEra compensate the county for lost real estate taxes?
Actually, the tax revenue would increase as a result of the installation of the facility, so it will be a net.
That won't happen. We already seen them going down just talking about it. It's not something that, you know, it's never ever will a pipeline over there make the homes more valuable. I don't care what you do to them.
Who is responsible for cleanups following spills? What is the liability of EQT?
Yeah, the owner-operator of the line is responsible for environmental cleanup.
What is the decibel level of a typical compressor station?
It can't exceed 55 decibel. So to put that into context, a normal conversation is 60 to 65 decibel. So the limitations on that are 55 decibel.
What are the possible negative effects on the watershed?
There should be no negative effects on the watershed.
How many residential neighborhoods similar to Preston Forest are located on the route?
I don't know the specific instance. I believe there are others. I just don't know the specific number.
Since you will use technology to monitor and control, would you put fiber for broadband in that trench, which the community could tap and use?
I mean, it's not anticipated in the design. We have seen instances where companies put broadband in for their own commercial purposes. It's not part of our purpose.
A pipeline runs close to our older daughter's school. Would you allow a pipeline near a child's school?
Yeah, I would. There was a presentation that was made here to the board about facilities that are under construction, that are being proposed in Massachusetts. I am from Massachusetts. There are actually 3 of them. All 3 of them are in my county. Pipelines are safe, and not only are they safe, but they're safest way to transport natural gas. The truth is that pipelines of an interstate nature, of a distribution nature, do coexist in communities, and they do so safely. So, I have children. I wouldn't put my children at risk. So yeah, I would allow a pipeline in proximity to my child's school.
Is this project affected by a Supreme Court ruling against eminent domain that applies to private gain?
I'm not aware of that ruling, and so I can't comment on that.
It's a Kelo decision in regards to taking property and for the benefit of others. It was a very controversial Supreme Court decision a few years back.
Okay. If it's a few years back, I can tell you that there have been instances of the use of eminent domain. Eminent domain in the history of our projects is used very seldomly. It's typically less than 3% of landowners. So I can't render a legal opinion. I would say it probably does not affect this project.
How do you plan to reduce the environmental impacts of blasting and crossing numerous streams, rivers, creeks that are in the proposed path?
Well, kind of 2 separate issues. The blasting itself is minimalized, and so I know that it was a bit tongue-in-cheek when it was referred to as small blasts, but the truth is it is really just meant to break it up so then it can be effectively trenched out like the rest of the line. In regards to water bodies are unidirectionally drilled underneath the water body.
How many pumping stations will be located in Montgomery County and Giles County? And how much space does each one require, and where will they be located?
Yeah, I think that's the one that we had answered. So, and basically, we won't know where they're located until we have the final design and the final route. But in regards to how many, just as an order of magnitude, we anticipate that there's probably one in Virginia. We just don't know where.
Could I have a second one?
Yes, sir.
Working on this. And my question, because I'm hearing a lot of the same stuff over and over, would you, either one of you, be willing, or all of you, be willing to go on an information trip with a member of the county to actually see the property in question?
Which property? Are we talking about Preston Forest?
Correct.
Yeah, we've actually been there today to take a look at the neighborhood, but we'd be glad to go there with the county officials, of course.
Do you plan to cross conservation easements?
We're typically not prohibited from crossing conservation easements, so yeah, I mean, we would cross a conservation.
Let me follow up though. We are working with a number of environmental organizations, the Nature Conservancy. We've met previously with the West Virginia Land Trust, so we are familiar with conservation easements and are trying to understand where all of those are along the route. So we are working with those agencies to assess where they are along the 300-mile route.
During construction, how many workers will be employed? How many of the workers will be skilled in pipeline construction, like welders and heavy equipment operators?
I can't say the number that will be employed, but there's a regulation about operator qualification where we employ workers that go through our operator qualification program to make sure that they're qualified to do the tasks that they're going to do on the job site. That includes excavation, that includes welding, coating.
And then, as to the number, we are in the process of conducting that study, and we expect we'll have it in the next couple of weeks that will go down to a very granular level as to the employee level.
Okay, let me follow up on that a little bit.
Yes, sir.
Do you all have a pipeline construction division, or do you contract with pipeline builders?
We have a pipeline construction division, project managers, but then we contract the actual construction out. We bid out that on the subcontractor basis.
Yeah.
How many miles of interstate gas pipeline does your company own and operate?
I believe we're around 900 miles at this point.
What is the minimum clearance distance between the AEP towers and the MVP 125-foot construction easement? Will the pipeline be under the wires 100 feet away, 500 feet away, or more?
Yeah, there's not necessarily a restriction on being under a wire. So if there is an electric transmission line, there isn't something that categorically prohibits it, but there are studies to be done in an instance where it is determined that a line would prevent a hazard, then it would either have to be mitigated or relocated.
Your website states that land will be restored to near original condition after pipeline construction. Elsewhere it states, quote, no planting of trees or deep-rooting plants would be allowed. Since much of the Virginia route is through forested land, is this a contradiction?
I think the qualifying factor clearly is to the greatest extent possible. So, and the straightforward answer is in an area that is forested, those trees would have to be removed, and because of the root system and because of the impact they could have on the pipe, they would not be replanted.
Yeah. Do a follow-up?
Yeah, go ahead.
Is your company willing to compensate for the timber that is going to have to be cut down to be able to accommodate this pipeline? Are you willing to provide that funds to the owners? Are you willing to provide set wood aside so they could then sell that wood as well?
In an instance like that, that would be compensation that would be negotiated with the landowner.
7,300 acres and 300 miles.
What chemicals besides methane will be in the pipeline? Will this ever change?
Yeah, natural gas is obviously a combination of chemicals, but if the question pertains to would it be used for another liquid or gas, no. The certificate will be for the purpose of transporting natural gas, and any change in use would have to go back through a permitting process.
Will you pay to repave county roads ruined by construction equipment?
Yes.
Let me follow up on that. How heavy is this? I mean, you bring this equipment in. How heavy is this equipment now? What's the average tonnage, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, it is typical construction equipment, bulldozers, backhoes, front-end loaders, that type of thing. So it is typically what you would see even on a road project.
It's not real heavy.
Well, it's all relative, right? It's, you know, it is heavy equipment, it is construction equipment, so, you know.
With this equipment, is it heavy enough to where you have to have special permits to transport from DP down 27 Virginia?
In certain circumstances, we would need the approval of the Department of Transportation, depending upon the size, the weight of the load.
Let me go here. Just 3 or 4 questions back. We spoke about watershed. And my question to you is, the watershed, you seem to think that the watershed does not apply to you folks. However, the county has to contribute to a watershed located beyond Troutville, even though we are not in the watershed going to the Chesapeake Bay. We don't put nary an ounce of water in that area. Why should you not be part of that plan?
I think as far as what our responsibility would be, we are responsible for impacts to the watershed, and our permitting, I don't want to give the impression that we don't think that any restrictions around a watershed apply to us, because they would.
Thank you.
As I understand it, the only insurance you will carry will be to restore damage to the pipeline and not to surrounding homes and property, etc. Is that correct?
No, that isn't correct.
Approximately how many homes will need to be torn down to construct the pipeline along the proposed route in Montgomery County?
No, I don't expect any homes to have to be torn down.
If you have commitments for 20 years of the full pipeline load, how can you ever envision opportunities for tapping in along the way?
The opportunities are for shippers to put gas into the pipe that are looking for opportunities to sell that. So it's in their best interest to find a market. And if that market is along the right of the route of the pipeline, there would be absolutely no commercial reason for them to discriminate.
Is it safe to put a pipeline so close to high voltage power lines?
Yes, typically it is, but they are studied specific to that. We're not aware of instances where they've been moved. There are certain circumstances where they require additional mitigation, but it is very atypical.
What is the estimated profit over 10 years of operation that your company is targeting from this pipeline?
I don't know the answer to that, and that would be proprietary information.
What is the history of natural gas pipeline explosions for these type of pipelines? This person understands that there have been pipeline explosions in Ohio and West Virginia in the past 2 to 4 years.
I don't know all of the incidents of explosion. We're aware that there have been as well. As I said, that a public safety instance like that is unacceptable to us. The reality is there is a tremendous amount of natural gas transmission infrastructure. As I said, 320,000 miles. There's a lot of statistics. I think some of them sound, frankly, quite glib. There is one that says you have a 75% greater chance of being struck by lightning. We take those very seriously. And when I had said a project like this is predicated on the value of bringing natural gas to market, and I know we don't all agree on that particular aspect of it. But if you're going to do that, transporting gas through a natural gas pipeline is by far the safest way to move natural gas.
How have your representatives been trained to request permission to survey? Several neighbors report inconsistent approaches by the landsmen, and all cite being threatened by eminent domain takeover of their property.
I don't know that I caught that whole question, but I got the general gist of it. From the very highest level, if somebody is being threatened with eminent domain or there are activities or behaviors from the land company, we want to know about them and they should be reported to FERC because that is unacceptable and it's not the policy of our company and it's not how we want our subcontractors to operate. So I will say, you know, if there have been improprieties, we want to know about it.
What is the blast zone of the 30-inch pipeline that you have operated?
I don't do those calculations myself, so I can't tell you what the blast zone is. It depends on the size of the pipe and what the maximum allowable operating pressure is.
I got the graph right here if you want to see.
You could probably tell me then.
30-inch pipeline, let's say 1,000 PSI, talking 660 feet blast radius. That's conservative.
But you're not the company putting it in.
No.
Does this number sound accurate to you? I know you didn't.
Yeah, it does. It does on an order of magnitude, yes.
Is it accurate that a pipe leak for 1 hour at full capacity releases the energy equivalent of the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima, Japan?
I don't know.
How quickly will a significant leak be detected and stopped by remote valve closures?
Yeah, probably about 15 minutes.
Let me follow up my question now. Well, I understand in talking to a number of fire chiefs that when an incident happens and it's an explosion or a leak that gets on fire, what they do is evacuate the area and let it burn out. As big as a 42-inch line, and you got automatic shut-off valves, I don't know how far forward, but that's a whole lot of gas in that line to come out through that crack to burn. I mean, that could really burn for days. If you shut it off, and you got a leak
that's
that's
a
coming out.
calculation too that would have to be done to see how long it will burn, but it's safer letting it burn than to put that fire out.
Oh yeah, I mean, that's what they're going to tell you. They're going to say, we're going to evacuate the area. And the reason why when you see pictures or TV coverage that you see a big ball of flame, is all we're doing is standing back, letting that gas burn. But the gas that is collected in the line, say if you have an automatic shut-off 15 miles over to Giles County and maybe somewhere down in Montgomery County, and the leak happens, say, midway up in Preston Forest, and the gas is burning, I mean, I think it's going to have to burn up all the gas in the line before it will burn itself out. Am I correct?
You would be correct, and that's something that would have to be taken into consideration in the design, and how far apart to put the valves.
Can I just say something? Something that's bothered me about a potential explosion is one thing if the gas line is going through like a field. It's another whole thing when it's sitting in a forest on a mountain with houses that have wooden components. And I can see that basically there'd be nothing left. So that's something that's worried me. Like if, you know, because the people that live there are very protective of not starting fires and doing things correctly because they are surrounded by trees. So that's something that's sort of worried me during all this discussion.
Yeah, of course. And when Joe was talking about the design of the pipeline, so the valves are, the distance between the valves vary based upon the circumstances, a situation like that, or the dense and humidity area.
Let me have one quick second, and this is for a gentleman who asked me if I would raise his concerns, and it says, what is fair about damaging property value to benefit a pipeline. I'm talking about houses behind the closest house to the fire. In other words, one back. When, you know, if it happens to get damaged by such a fire as you were just talking about, how do you not take care of that back house too?
Yeah, is the question in regards to compensation for the easement, and I think the chairman had asked the question about property adjacent.
Right.
You know, it really is the compensation system that was set up by FERC. So, you know, it's really just the way it has been done. The property that is directly burdened by an easement is compensated.
This might be preparatory. Let me ask you one question. This might be preparatory information too, but when you filed your permit, is it with FERC? Is it some kind of fee that you have to submit to FERC to file that?
Did you say a deed?
A fee that they charge, because I don't see how a federal agency could do all the things that it's supposed to do without charging something for compensation.
Yeah, we are responsible for the costs associated with the development of the draft and final environmental impact statement. So generally the burdens are on a project proponent. I'm sure that there are some costs that are incurred by the agencies as well, but believe me, they shift as many of those over as possible, and rightfully so.
Mr. Chair, I believe this question is for the county. Have first responders in Montgomery County been trained to respond to gas leaks and gas emergencies?
Well, there's two answers to that, and I think Supervisor King, who's a volunteer fireman, may have one. But at a recent Fire and Rescue Commission meeting with Pipeline on the Brain, I asked the fire chiefs and rescue chiefs two very important questions. And the questions were, are they trained enough to respond to gas line emergencies? Two, do they need any kind of specialized equipment? And the information that I came away from that meeting with was that yes and no. Yes, they're trained to respond, evacuate the area, and let the leak or burn out, let it burn itself out. That it's not to attack it or anything like that. And the same thing, I asked, did they feel that they have adequate equipment to respond to emergencies along the pipeline within the county? And they said, well, yes and no. Especially when you look at the terrain and stuff like that, you have, you got tanker trucks. You don't have fire plugs up there to deal with it. Even if you are some houses in proximity of the burn and they want to wet that house down, for an example, to keep it from catching on fire from the heat. And it would take like some tanker trucks to get water up to it. And matter of fact, I think Supervisor King attended some training just recently put on by Atmos Gas Company. Yeah, you can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, we, about 2 months ago, the county was privileged to go to pipeline training, and Atmos had really good review of everything. And we go through 1,500 hours a year in training. That's the minimum we go through. I feel pretty sure myself as a fireman that we have very good training and equipment. We're very privileged here in Montgomery County, the equipment we do have.
Thank you.
Is the coating of the pipe toxic to the soil in which the pipe is buried?
No.
Has FERC ever denied permission for your company to construct a pipeline?
Yeah, we haven't denied permits. We have, in certain circumstances, not an outright denial. We have been denied that work before, and we're aware of circumstances where they've denied others infrastructure.
What is the maximum weight of agricultural equipment that can be used in the right-of-way and over top of the Mountain Valley Pipeline?
That would have to go through an engineering process to determine what that maximum weight is. There's no one number.
But so, at its burial depth, it would accommodate industrial equipment, your typical agricultural uses of property, and the machinery that's associated with that. Now, where there are circumstances where there is a use of property that requires heavier vehicles, that's an accommodation we can make specifically with the landowner.
I believe this question may have come from a young person who's here tonight. Why does the pipeline have to come through here?
Yeah, no, it's a fair question, and it's a question that's asked by everybody. And the way these are looked at, and this goes beyond pipelines. I've been involved in siting energy infrastructure for 18 years, and that's really of all varieties. And it's really obviously the most common question, and not just from young people. The truth is, when the permitting authorities look at infrastructure like this, particularly under a National Environmental Policy Act review, in its simplest terms, it's a balancing test between the societal benefits and the burden that a particular community has by hosting a facility. So, as I had said, you know, the mandate is to expand the use of natural gas. And while they recognize that along the 300-mile route, those communities, regardless of the benefit, have a disproportionate burden because they're the host community. The value, the societal value is ultimately, if a project is approved, that means that the permitting authority has determined that the societal value outweighs that burden.
How will you mitigate the serious erosion that will occur when you cut through pristine rivers such as the Roanoke River, the massive 42-inch pipeline?
Can you say the first part of that again?
How will you mitigate the serious erosion that will occur?
When we're dealing with waterways, we directionally drill. So in a circumstance like that, we would set up on either side and go underneath the water body so that we have as minimal impact on that water body as possible.
If a local tap is desired for economic development, can it be added after the pipeline is in operation, or must it be built into the pipeline during construction?
Excuse me, it can be added after the fact. It's a little more costly and obviously a lot more involved in doing it that way. It is easier to design it, and we're designing the pipeline. However, you have to know where the opportunity and the need and the demand is at that point in order to place the tap in the right location. So to answer your question, it can be done both in construction and after the pipeline is operational.
How will the current economic uncertainty in the petroleum market affect the company in its planned expansion?
So fuel oil, right now, I think everybody knows, has dropped below $80. The competitiveness of natural gas is still very far superior to any other fossil fuel alternative. And when you factor in the cost of the environmental regulations that have even most recently been placed upon the use of fossil fuel by the federal government, the compliance cost of using natural gas makes it the preferable fuel driver for most applications.
How far away does the pipeline need to be from the power line?
As we said before, there's really no specified distance. In most circumstances, it can be right adjacent to the power line.
If pipeline excavation encounters rock that cannot be moved by machinery, what happens? Will rock be blasted? Will the pipeline be rerouted? Will the top of the pipeline be closer than 4 feet or above the original grade level?
Actually, all of those alternatives would be available. In an instance where you encountered rock, we would blast to be able to then trench dig. There are allowances in rocky areas to lessen the depth of the line. And then if it was an area that was unconstructible, which is very atypical, then the pipeline would have to be moved.
This question concerns pipeline safety in the Giles County seismic zone. What specific aspects of this pipeline ensure that it will not break or otherwise leak gas if subjected to a magnitude 5.9 earthquake, as occurred in 1897, if the epicenter is located within 1 kilometer of the pipeline?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there are a lot of specifics on that, and we did deal with that. When we are considering the placement of the line as a part of the environmental impact statement, we will consider, there will be studies done and the knowledge will be ascertained as to the geologic conditions in that area. That said, there are no limitations, just really because of the prolific nature of the natural gas system and the extensive amount of faults in the country.
What is the maximum allowable operating pressure in a housing development? And how do you plan to lower that pressure in our neighborhoods?
There's no limit.
Yeah, I mean, there's a maximum allowable operating pressure on a pipeline, but, and there's no limit in DOT code, but at this point in time, I don't know on this pipeline if that maximum allowable operating pressure has been designed yet, so.
There has been a person in the county staying at a local hotel whose job has been to visit large landowners and offer checks on the spot for permission to access their land for the pipeline. 1, is this legal? And 2, what purpose is this serving?
I'm honestly not aware of that practice, and it's not the nature of our business to go and just offer money for access. So unless there's a special circumstance associated with that, I'm just not aware of it.
Have you spoken with Virginia Tech officials about providing gas directly to their campus?
Not officially. We have not talked with Virginia Tech. So we know that I guess they have from what I understand, a coal-fired plant on campus, and have perhaps talked about the benefits from an environmental perspective of modifying that fuel source. If that's again back to the conversation about what kinds of economic development opportunities and benefits there are for the county, if that's something that is of interest, then we'd love to have a conversation.
It is my understanding that if fugitive methane emissions exceed 4%, natural gas is actually worse than coal in terms of greenhouse gas impacts. How does your company monitor and guarantee it prevents all fugitive emissions?
We, kind of goes back to the actual operational monitoring. We monitor for any release. So the operational parameters are to have no release. So in comparing natural gas to coal, you know, the reality is from a carbon perspective, you're 40% less in your carbon emissions, so it's a significant net benefit.
How many feet of trees maximum will you intend to cut down to build this pipeline? And will you replant hardwood trees in the same space cleared up to the final easement?
I don't know what the answer is to the amount of trees as far as a linear foot, but part of planting trees, if we were to need a 70-foot easement, ultimately we're looking at approximately 130 to accommodate construction. So if repairing that additional 50 feet to its pre-construction use was the planting of trees, then yes.
How do you plan to build roads into the great number of mountains that this pipeline will be constructed over?
It would be site-specific, but typically we don't have to build roads. The equipment can navigate that, and I do understand that you know, we have built in mountainous type regions, and we are familiar with that.
Are you willing to compensate owners of surrounding properties not directly affected, whose property values have been decimated?
No, typically that's not a calculation of the development law.
We understand that in other areas where EQT is in business, people are not entirely pleased with performance, especially environmental protection. What cases or other actions are you currently involved in?
Not sure specifically of the incident that you're referring to there. And I think it may have to do with a recent incident in Pennsylvania where during the drilling of a well, the pit was actually damaged, and that was rectified immediately, and there is currently a dispute on the amount of penalty. But that was an incident where EQT was notified immediately of it, and they took great lengths to rectify it, and it's now there's vegetation growing on it, and it's just a matter of the settlement of the pit.
EQT has said that 80% of landowners agreed to land surveys. How many people were interviewed, and how many were informed of the surveys in advance, and how many were given a required or certified letter?
There haven't been, so the process is we send the letter and then we notify. So we always notify people prior to accessing the property. I think the second part of that had to do with the Virginia statute that enables the company ultimately to access the property. And I had said that the letter is sent out and then it would notify people that we would access the property within 10 days. I was actually confused that with the West Virginia statute, so it's actually in Virginia, it's 15 days. We have not begun sending those out.
Mr. Chair, I believe we've come to the end of our index cards, but I'm sure staff would be happy to pick up any cards that the audience may have if you've thought of any other questions.
Okay, anybody has any cards out there, raise your hand. Huh? Can you still get a card? Yes, you may. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I've just got one question.
No, I submitted a card that was not asked as well.
Yeah, so did I.
Oh, was it a similar question that has already been asked?
No.
Well, we've got staff hanging out right there and handing out additional cards. You can go ahead and fill those questions out.
In the essence of time, would, ma'am, Mr. Richardson, I believe?
Yeah, Diana.
Diana, instead of filling out a card, in the essence of time, when you come to that mic and state your question, keep them right, and we can move right on into it. Just,
Now.
Yeah. And who else, you asked a question too, did you, gentlemen, sir? You right here? Okay. In the essence of time, after she asks her question and get a response, we'll let you ask your question. Okay. And we want questions and not comments, just so everyone has an opportunity if they didn't get a chance.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
I have a two-part question, sort of, and the first part of it came up after listening to you tonight. I want to know if you are up to this, because you either are not knowledgeable about so many things because you didn't answer questions, not just questions that we asked that you might not know specifics about, but you don't seem to know the answers about your own business. So I want to know, since you've never put in a 42-inch pipeline, there are two others that are being built now, but none are in operation. So, you know, you haven't done a project this big. You haven't done a project this long. So, do you think you're up to it? And why?
Yeah, no, I do. And so let me address that. The reason we don't have answers to a lot of it is because of the preliminary nature of this project. And as I had indicated, when we come into we want to get started, and because we are talking to people about access to land. So when people are accessing land, or when we're requesting access to land, people say, why? What are you doing? And right now we have a proposal, and we haven't refined that proposal to an extent where we would have those answers.
I'm really not talking about those. I'm talking about things you should know, like the size of a blast zone, for goodness sake. And you're in this business.
Yeah, and so the difficulty with those questions are they require a lot of, there's a lot of variables to a question like that. It does require knowing what the pressure of the pipe is going to be, and you know, the size of it, and things that we just don't know now.
But if you're planning this, why don't you have some idea?
It doesn't, it has to do not with our knowledge or lack thereof of pipelines. It is the infancy of the project. EQT has been in the pipeline business for 130 years. You know, next there, between the two of us, we have over 200 years of development.
I don't want to take up a lot of time.
No, I understand, but I mean, you raise a question that I understand, and as we've gone to the counties, we get that frustration. And you know, this is, and I don't mean this, I don't want this to sound like I'm saying it in a defensive posture, but for companies like ours, FERC sets out a process that says, show up at the open houses and answer questions there. And, you know, we want to get out before that, and we recognize we don't have all of the information.
So will you have more?
Yeah, we absolutely will. We'll have more on an ongoing basis. We'll put it on our website. We'll be out here. Max is the director of outreach. He's going to coordinate all of this. As we said to the chairman, we'll come back in front of the county as often as possible. So, you know, honestly, in all sincerity, I understand the frustration.
Well, this is a question. My real question is,
okay.
And this is something I know you know. We have been talking to our friends in the far Southwest, both county governments and individuals, and they are not happy with you all at all, and have said things in print, such as that you have dealt with them in underhanded ways and have changed.
Okay, ma'am, that's not a question.
I know here's the question though. Has that happened, and what has caused this? I mean, we need to know this.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's, if that has happened, I have not seen it in print, and it has not been relayed to me, and in fact, it's been quite the opposite. You know, if somebody has a concern like that, I mean, let's be honest, the four of us have been sitting up here for 3 hours, and we'll sit up here for 3 hours again. We've gone to every county. I understand and I respect that there is a general disagreement on whether we build this pipeline. But the one thing we want to know, we want you to know, and the reason we're sitting up here is because we do want to impart information. We want to impart timely and accurate information. And I want to tell you, we want to tell you, when we don't have an answer to something yet, we're going to tell you that. People don't always like it, and sometimes the answers to the questions aren't particularly popular. But we want to be honest and forthright. In regards to our interactions with the other counties, from my perspective, it has been overwhelmingly positive. And if that's not the case, I want to know about it, and I haven't seen it in print. I mean, I did see a blog that was not particularly flattering.
Given that EQP is currently under criminal charges for the pollution of 3 waterways in Pennsylvania, we would like to know what it is that you can do to assure us that our fragile and vital karst water will not be contaminated.
Well, again, the only incident that I'm aware of is the incident that took place during the drilling of a well when a pit liner ruptured, and that was immediately repaired and has been rectified and reclaimed. There is ongoing dispute over the penalty, how long, how many days that was in fact at that point. And so the penalty has not been, is the only thing that's been disputed. But that was done by the local agency that regulates the drilling of wells in Pennsylvania, and it's currently been rectified, other than the penalty.
Hi, good evening. I had a question about, you gave us an approximate number, apparently it must be approximate, of your company's investment of $3.2 billion to construct a pipeline. It's also my understanding that you do not own the gas as flows through the pipeline. You do not gain any profit from the sale of that gas. I'm curious as to what your revenue stream is. If you can give me some idea as how you will make the $3.2 billion plus your profit back.
Right. The business model behind the pipeline, it is true. We don't have the number, right? We expect $3 to $3.5 billion, depending upon the ultimate design. We do not take title to the actual commodity, the natural gas. But we are paid by the owner of the natural gas for them to be able to take that product to market. So in essence, we're more of a transportation company than we are, in this particular instance, a commodity company. So we get paid per decatherm for gas they put on that pipe and then take off that.
Hey, I'm one of those people up in Preston Forest. My question is, so you're going to try to avoid the houses is what you said. If you end up having to go to somebody's house, do you also buy them land so they're not stuck having a lot they can't use?
Yes.
Okay, now the other question is, depending on where it goes, it could also run through people's septic fields, through their well, through the driveway. If you have to take some part of their land that would make the lot unusable for their house, would you also just go ahead and buy the whole thing?
It would be, honestly, it varies on a case-by-case basis, but based upon a scenario like that, if the determination is that it's rendered valueless, yes.
Okay.
So any portion of a property, typically it's limited to the easement, but in certain circumstances, if somebody has a use that they can't continue, then yes.
Okay, so if it was like going through a septic field, then you just go ahead and buy that.
Well, again,
if there was nowhere else to build the septic.
Right, and let me be straightforward in what I'm trying to avoid. Okay. So what I don't want the message to be is, if we go through a septic field, we're buying a house. Because that may not be true.
Okay, because there's some of those places, there's only one place to put a septic field.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Over here.
I just have a couple quick questions. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Supervisor Tuck asked a question about the application of pesticides and clearing some of the foliage and forest that you would have to remove, and you said you'd be willing to enter into negotiations about that, but what is the, so you obviously use those substances, what is the typical procedure that you use to apply them, and how do you guarantee that you would not be contaminating wells in the application process?
So let me kind of clarify. We do want to discuss that with the community. I did not say we would enter into negotiations. I want to alleviate any misconception about that. This is the type of thing of an environmental nature that will be considered in the overall project. So if there are pesticides or something like that that are detrimental, yes, you know, we're prevented from using those. There are instances, and we have, both our companies have miles of linear energy infrastructure. There are instances where pesticides are used, and that really varies from location to location and jurisdiction to jurisdiction.
Is it true that the joint venture that your two companies have entered into for this pipeline is a limited liability corporation?
The legal structure. Yeah, it's an LLC. And that's a very typical corporate structure these days. You know, very similar.
That certain of your individual assets are protected, as I understand it, although perhaps Supervisor Tuck can help me with that.
And that's no different from, you know, we have 42,000 megawatts of generation. Those are typically developed on a project-by-project basis. So all of those, the typical business model is they are contained in our company. That's right.
And one final question. You counted in your slides that NextEra was the leading domestic producer of solar and wind energy. Why don't you lead this country into renewable energy by putting your efforts into moving behind it?
Can you talk about the reduction in emissions? Two parts to that. We continue you know, a prime part of our business is the development of both wind and solar. We're looking at other technologies. We're looking at storage technologies. We have about 11 gigawatts of solar. 11 gigawatts of wind, 900 megawatts of solar. We operate two of the largest solar fields in the country. We are committed to renewable energy. But I also have to say that part of our strategy to reduce our emissions has been to convert about 25% of our fleet is fueled by fossil fuels. And so since 2001 to date, we have reduced our use of fuel oil by 99%. And in doing that, we have reduced our emissions so that we are considerably below industry standards. So for a company like ours, I understand, you know, we develop renewable energy to the greatest extent possible. We love the technology. We have a competitive advantage in it. We will continue to develop renewable energy. We don't see this as contradictory to our efforts to lower emissions.
Thank you, folks, for being here.
Thank you.
In the hot seat for this. I have to admit, when I heard about this, I was terrified. I'm still terrified, and even more terrified after hearing what we've heard today and some other times. The first thing that came to my mind is the water quality. We've made the assumption that you folks understand what karst topography is. Do you all understand what limestone caverns are? Do all of you? All four of you?
Do we have a sophisticated knowledge of?
Yeah, do you understand what they're
No, we do not.
But you know what it is, you know what you're
Yeah,
talking about.
yes, and it will be part of the studies,
Okay.
but yeah, our limited knowledge of such
Okay, but I mean, you know what we're talking about.
Sure.
At the very base of, just happens since we're talking about Preston Forest so much, at the very base of Preston Forest Drive, if you go straight out, just to go out kind of arm's distance away from this whole area, I know of a cow that fell into an open hole when the sinkhole collapsed and her legs were hanging into open void. There's nothing underneath these places. It's just really very fragile Swiss cheese or waffles, whatever you want to call it. My concern is we're talking about putting very big pipes full of very dangerous material cutting across very fragile surfaces. Okay? That's after you've brought this very heavy equipment across, dug down at least, say it's a 42-inch pipeline, you're talking about digging down, what, 7 feet, so you can cover it with 3 feet of dirt? You're going to be digging, taking off the tops of some of these. So they don't have these pipes hanging in the air. In addition, what would be happening is that the structure itself will be agitated by all this construction, and so it's going to be more fragile. In addition, the mud is going to fill up those things, fill up our waterways, contaminate our wells with the mud from the construction. We all know what the construction sites look like. They're 150-foot wide swaths where you move the dirt that you've dug out of these humongous trenches and dumped it on the sides. That's going to flow right into our water. It's going to change the course of the water. It's going to fill up wells. It's going to, right now we change our water filter once every 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 months if we happen to remember. We'd have to change it daily. And it's true of everybody in this whole area. In addition, what will happen is that I know where they dump the dye on the ground in the same valley, in Mount Tabor Valley. It showed up in the Roanoke River.
Excuse me, ma'am. Ma'am, do you have a specific question?
Yes, I do. It showed up in the next valley in 15 minutes in the Roanoke Valley. That's the watershed for Roanoke City. So it's not just a bunch of rural, people who live all over the place in this valley. My question is, how are you going to keep the pipes from collapsing? How do you keep the pipe that's lost some of its support because it's undermined by a pillar falling down underground? You've said you monitor this once every 7 years. That's a joke. It needs to be monitored very frequently, weekly, in this area. I've seen these things collapse suddenly. How can you say that the stiff pipes, even if we don't have an earthquake, how are these pipes going to stay and not crack? How are you going to see the leaks that are pointing straight down and spreading the gas all over the place and who knows where? I mean, this is a huge problem. I cannot believe that when people looked at these maps who chose this route, they didn't realize this is Dixie Caverns, Luray Caverns, and so forth. I mean, it's caverns. It's the whole Giles County, all over our place. And coal mines under Preston Forest. So anyway, my concern is these big pipes are very stiff. They may be coated with epoxy, which I believe is non-toxic. I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about when it fails, when it rusts out from the inside, when the...
Excuse me, ma'am, I want to get to these two questions.
Okay,
right
but
quick.
anyway,
Let's get to your question.
But how are you going to deal with these pipes? I mean, these pipes are going to keep falling and nobody's measuring them for 7 years?
So it's not that we monitor them every 7 years, we monitor them on an ongoing basis.
But it has to be weekly.
Well, no, I mean 24/7. And so I want to address the geologic conditions because part of those discoveries are made during the environmental survey process. And you're right, there's a lot of desktop information available that will help them determine that. The rest of that is determined when they actually conduct an environmental survey. So a circumstance that you're talking about where they were to build in a geologic condition that would compromise the integrity of the pipe won't happen. And it won't happen to the point where if they can't build in that location...
Why are they wasting their money even looking in this area? I mean, it's insane if it's not...
Hello, well, this is...
Sorry.
Okay. It's 10:28, and we have to be out of here at 10:30. And so I'm winding down now so we can get out. It's 10:26. So we'll take your question and your question, and we won't take any more. So you have to ask me quickly so we can get out here by 10:30.
Since a lot of people tonight were concerned on safety, how do you value safety at your corporate level?
We value safety above everything else.
Okay. Would you like to comment on the citations that you have according to OSHA's website within the last 4 years in the states of West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Texas?
Is that an EQT question or an extra question?
I'm sorry?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
It's an EQ. Yes.
EQT, yes. No. Yeah, no, if you're not familiar with those beyond the instance that Maurice had indicated.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to take this lady right here, and if you have questions that you hadn't put on one of these 4 or 5 cards, raise your hand and you can fill that card out before you leave, and we'll make sure that those people get those cards. But I think they're going to come back to our office with us first. We're not going to give them to them tonight. So go ahead, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman, could I also note that we have an 800 number on our website, so we welcome questions to the board, obviously, but please call us directly.
Okay.
So this is a question for EQT. Anybody who can do a quick Google search knows that you're facing multiple lawsuits, and you asked for something in print. This is from print, in print from the Avalon Law Associates, and it refers to you as CNX Gas, and says the residents are also frustrated because they are not getting paid the fair market value for their property. A recent investigation looked at approximately 750 active accounts, and the results showed that 22% to 55% of those accounts have not received their fair market value payments that are due under a taking by eminent domain. How can you promise the residents of Montgomery County or Southwest Virginia that they will receive fair compensation when it's obvious that other residents are not?
I'm not familiar with any eminent domain.
Familiarize yourself.
This, to my knowledge, there's not any situation relating to eminent domain in pipeline right away. There is a current situation relating to royalty pertaining to gas wells. The current statute allows for royalties to be paid into an escrow account that it's managed by the state. So those royalties go into the escrow account for property owners who would be unlocatables or unknown or have a dispute with another property owner. That's not an account that we manage, it's an account that's managed by the state.
So you're denying accountability and saying it's the responsibility of the state?
The company has paid all the royalties into that state escrow account. Yes.
What about Dickinson County? Can you talk a little bit about the lawsuits that are currently going on in Dickinson?
And why?
And why?
And why?
I'm sorry, but it's 10:30 and we have to be out of here. What I want to do is, on behalf of the Board of Supervisors, we want to thank you all for your attendance here tonight. Thank you for your patience. We know that there's probably hundreds of more questions out there that you'd like to have answers to, but only this time we'll submit. We thank our staff for helping us, pulling us off tonight, and we also thank the people from the pipeline for being in attendance tonight.
Thank you.
Need a motion. We are adjourned.
Made it.